Kanika, I have sent you the link.
Thanks.
એખાન જે પડ્યો તારા આવજો હરી શ્રીધર
సార్ అదే ఎట్లా సార్ మళ్ళీ కొత్త బుక్ అప్లై చేసేదా చింపించే
Correct.
Welcome back to the afternoon session of the workshop today. So today we have Dr. Harish Sridhar, who is currently a postdoctoral fellow at National Center for Biological Sciences, which is a biology research institute based in Bangalore. And he will conduct a workshop on communication skills, so without much delay, I will hand over to him.
Okay, thank you, Vishwesha. Let me just share the screen first. Okay, can you see the presentation?
Yes, Hari, we can see
Okay.
that all presented.
Thanks, Mish. Okay, thanks again, Vishwesha, and I also thank all of you for attending this workshop. It's over 4 days. It's not a small investment of your time. So thank you all for coming. And I hope you've found it interesting and it's been worth your while so far. Like Vishwesha said, I'm currently a postdoc, a researcher at the National Center for Biological Sciences. But before that, I did my PhD at the Center for Ecological Sciences with Karthik Shankar, and also spent a few years in Vishwesha's lab doing postdoctoral research. This session in the schedule you would have seen, it's called Communication Skills, which is somewhat broad and vague. What I want to talk to you about today is something much more specific, and that is, all of you are at the stage of doing your undergrad or your masters, and soon you would probably be looking for opportunities to do research, internships and master's projects, or even PhD positions in different institutes. And usually the starting point for that is to inquire about such opportunities with faculty. And what I want to talk to you about today is, when you send such emails, what do faculty expect, in emails that they receive from people inquiring about such positions. So this session today is going to be focused very specifically on this aspect. It's not more broadly about communication skills. In fact, I don't think anyone needs to teach you about communication skills. It's something that comes naturally to everyone with experience, and you communicate differently depending on who you're talking to or communicating with, or in what context. But it's useful to know about, what the people you're writing to expect to see when you communicate with them in this specific context. And so that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. So maybe it's more appropriate to call this communication conventions. It's not really a skill, but what's the norm, or what's the custom in communication with regard to these inquiry emails that students might send to faculty. Before I proceed, I want to say that it's a small group of people, and you're welcome to interrupt, unmute yourself, and ask me questions at any point in time. You can also put the questions in the chat box. While I have some material that I would like to go through, it's not at all necessary that I go through all of it. And I think what might be more useful is for us to be clear about the little that we do, rather than go through a large number of topics that we are not entirely clear about at the end of it. So it's fine if you don't finish what I plan to do. So at any point, feel free to interrupt me and ask questions, or if it's clear to get it clarified. So why are these conventions important? You might wonder, why is it important that emails are written in a certain way? After all, what should be important to the faculty is whether the person writing to him or her is interested in research, is likely to be able to carry out the research well, and so on. So why is it important how they write the emails, right? So I see some arrows on the screen. Does everyone see it? I don't know what's happening. Is this?
Yes, we can see these arrows, Hari.
This is not part of my presentation.
Okay.
So I don't know where it's coming from.
Might have something to do with your pointer and the way it's set up, no?
I don't think so. Let me. Okay, let's. Should I stop sharing and share again? You think that'll help? Let me try.
Sure.
Okay. So as I was saying that, you might wonder why these conventions are important. Why is it important to write emails in a particular way? Why can't emails be written differently? And, because what the faculty really should be evaluating is whether this person writing is interested in the research and whether that person is able to perhaps be able to tell if that person will be able to carry out the research well. But unfortunately, there are all kinds of constraints. We don't live in an ideal world. And I'd like to talk to you about a couple of constraints that are important in this regard. One is that, faculty, from my conversations with them, they clearly receive many more emails than they can handle. All of us are flooded by email, faculty more so. And not only do they receive more email in general, but they also receive many such inquiry emails about positions even on a daily basis. So it is often difficult, sometimes impossible for them to maybe read and respond to every such email that they receive. So it's useful to think about these conventions so that you improve your chances of the email being read and responded to by faculty. The other is that, how you write your email creates a first impression. Again, I'm not necessarily saying that this is a good thing. I mean, first impressions often can be misleading, but when you write an email to somebody and inquire about a position, the person receiving the email is forming some impression about you. They use the email as an indicator of your suitability for position. They do this in a conscious way. For example, the care that you take to find out about the faculty's interest, research, how much background reading you've done. All of these might be used as indicators of how careful you might be in your own research if you join the lab. It could also happen in an unconscious way. The way in which you write the email and the language you use might unconsciously affect the impression that faculty form about you. Again, in an ideal world, these things maybe shouldn't matter. Faculty should be able to judge directly, your suitability for research, and but that's not the case, right? So often people are using these indirect cues to tell if people might be suitable for research or not. By the way, I should stop here and just say that, I've never been in a position to receive emails like this. I haven't been faculty or people, I don't have a lab and people haven't written to me. So I want to tell you a little bit about the perspective I'm bringing here. This perspective on this topic comes from conversations I've had with contemporaries and seniors who are faculty, and what they have to say about the emails they receive. So that's from the point of view of the faculty. It also comes from my own experiences in writing to faculty in similar situations, writing to faculty to inquire about positions, to ask them whether there's a place in their lab. So it comes partly from that. And also, once Vishwesha asked me if I am willing to do this session, I've tried to read a little bit about these issues, read about what faculty have to say about these issues, and also think a little bit about these issues. So my perspective is coming from these sort of three different angles. But I noticed that there are other people in the audience who are faculty, like Vishwesha himself, Maria, and Umesh, maybe Karthik as well. So it would be really, really helpful if at any point any of you wants to sort of pitch in to add to what I'm saying or to present a different point of view. Yeah. Okay. So, like I said, what I want to do in this session is really talk about this email or this inquiry that you might want to send to a faculty to ask them about positions in their lab, either in the context of an internship or if you want to carry out a thesis project, or if you're interested in inquiring about a PhD position. And for any of this, the first step is really to identify the research group or the lab or the particular faculty that you would like to work with. Now, today that's become a lot easier because most faculty, most lab groups have websites that provide a lot of really useful information about the research that they do, about the availability of positions, what you need to do if you're interested in joining the lab, and so on. So that is definitely an important first step, to look for on the internet, to look for the websites of people who are doing the kind of research you might be interested in. But I also want to point you to two very specific links that, if you're not already aware of, are in the context of ecology and conservation, ecology, evolution, and conservation in India, are particularly useful. One is the group, the mailing list called Meet Yeti, and this is the link. I'll also, send you the link separately by email. So Meet Yeti is a mailing list where which can now has I think over 1,000 members, where very often you see useful information about positions available, projects, people looking for people to come and work on the projects, and so on. So if you're interested in finding positions or research positions and PhDs and project ideas, it's definitely worthwhile joining the Meet Yeti group. Similar to the Meet Yeti group, but with maybe a larger scope, is a group called Nat History India, which has been around for a longer time. And this is also a group where you often hear about really interesting, positions that are available for research opportunities in ecology, evolution, and conservation in India. Apart from this, I think it's useful to talk to people, wherever you are in your college, your faculty, people who have graduated from your college earlier, to find out about opportunities. I think often we underestimate the value or importance of these things. Just conversations with people around you might be very useful. I'm not on social media, but from talking to colleagues who are on platforms like Twitter, I know that a lot of really useful information in this regard is now available on social media. People put out ads for positions on social media, so that might be something to consider getting on to if you're looking for opportunities in these fields. So what I want to do now is to talk to you about certain conventions in drafting emails that might be useful to keep in mind, just to increase the chances of your email being read and responded to by faculty. And to do this, I've depended a lot on a blog post that Vishwesha has written. The link of that is at the bottom of this slide, where he has written a really useful blog post on how to write email applications for short-term research positions. But what he has to say also applies to other kinds of inquiries, also about PhD positions in general, about sending emails to inquire about something. I think there's useful tips and information here for drafting any kind of email where you want to reach out to someone and find out about position or the opportunities available in a person's research group. Of course, for other kinds of need to provide extra information, but some of the basic principles that Vishwesha has written about in this blog post are also useful in other contexts. So to start with, all emails have a subject line, and usually when an email arrives in someone's inbox, what the person sees is the sender and the subject line. So it's often useful to think carefully about what you put in that subject line, right? To make sure that it is noticed by the person receiving the email, and the person receiving the email knows what that email is about. So the subject line, should sort of, in a few words, clearly communicate the purpose of the email. And I want to show you a few examples and maybe talk about, which of these subject lines are serving this purpose and which are not serving this purpose, right? So for instance, often we all do this. We leave if you're not sure about what to say in the subject line, we leave it blank, which might not be a good idea at all, because the person receiving the email has no idea what it is about. And if he or she has received, 100 emails that day, this is not one of the emails that they're going to look at immediately, because there's no indication of what is in that email, right? Similarly, if you use just the subject line inquiry, it's not really clear. You're not communicating what the inquiry is about, and the person receiving it has no idea about who this person is who's sending the email. Is it a student? Is it another professor? Is it a vendor? So I think that also does not have enough information. And similarly for the next one, just application does not communicate enough about what the email is about. Sometimes, and I've done this very often when writing to people, to write about the area of research I'm interested in, in the lab. So like, for instance, if you're writing to Vishwesha, you might say collective animal behavior because that's something he's interested in, and you're also interested in, but that does not communicate why you're writing to him about collective animal behavior. Are you writing to him about possible collaboration? Are you writing to him about a paper that you've seen? It doesn't communicate any of that, right? So the first 4 subject lines that I've shown here, the examples I've shown, are maybe not the most useful subject lines to use because they don't provide enough information about what is in the email. The next one tells you a little more. It tells you that you're inquiring about an internship, so the person receiving it knows that it's about an internship. But again, there's not enough information. One important thing to remember is that faculty often want to know if you are sending out an email specifically to them, or is this an email that you've sent out generically to a large number of people, right? And they're more likely to respond and be interested if you're sending out an email specifically to them, right? So just a subject line that is internship does not really communicate that. This could be an email that you've sent out to, say, 20 different people, right? Numbers 6 and 7 are maybe more suitable, right? So where the person is clearly saying internship in a collective animal behavior project, or even more specifically, summer internship in a collective animal behavior project. So if someone sends this to Vishwesha, then he knows that here is a person who's interested in spending some time in my lab working on collective animal behavior. In the case of number 7, even more, is a person who's interested in spending time in my lab on a collective animal behavior project in the summer, right? So being, clearly communicating what the purpose of the email is in the subject line is very useful. This is again, important that when we start writing, even when you were writing letters earlier and you start writing emails, we often hesitate to address people by their name. And especially when students are writing, they think maybe it's not appropriate to address the professor by name. So we have the tendency to say, dear sir, or dear madam, or if you're not sure, we say dear sir or madam / madam. Again, this might seem like a small thing, but addressing a person by the name, prefixed by their title, is useful because again, then the person knows that you've written specifically to her or him, right? So if you say dear Dr. Iswaran or dear Dr. they know that this email is specifically addressed to them and that they are not receiving a generic email that's being sent to a large number of people, right? So for that reason alone, it is important that you try and address the person you're emailing by name. Yeah. So once you have the subject line and what is called the salutation, then it's useful to talk a little bit about yourself, right? And it's useful to think about how the person receiving the email is looking at this, right? So they want to know who's sending them the email. They now know what the email is about. They know it's being addressed specifically to them. They want to know who's sending the email. So you can start by saying a little bit about yourself, details that are relevant to the context in which you're writing to this person. And so what might that be? You're most likely studying in a college. So talk about the course you're doing, the year in which you're studying, which college you're studying in, which town or city you're studying in. Just in a couple of lines, tell them a little bit about who you are and what your current affiliation is. What are you currently doing, right? And then also talk about what the purpose of the email. So this is basically just a fleshing out of the subject line. Say a little more about why you're writing to this person. So if you're looking for an internship, you can say, I'm writing to you because I would like to discuss the possibility of an internship in your lab. Or I'm writing to you because I would like to discuss the possibility of doing a PhD in your lab or some such thing. In a sentence, state fairly early in your email why you're writing to this person. And then this really is the most sort of important, crucial section of the email, right? And why is this important? It's because the person you're writing to wants to see that you have done some background research, you've looked through the research that is being done in the lab, you have identified the area of research within the lab that you are particularly interested in. You have thought a little bit about what the connection between that area of research is and what you have done in your own work, or your own interests. And so this section, where you talk about the specific aspect of research in a person's lab that you're interested in and your connection to it is really, really important. And you need to spend some time thinking about this, right? So if you have done, work that is related to that, if you've had prior experience, you could talk about that and connect it to the research that's being done in the lab. But even if you don't have any prior research experience, it doesn't matter. You can talk about why you're interested in this particular piece of research. What is it about it that appeals to you? Talk about maybe if you've read something related to that you find fascinating. Talk about an idea that you might have related to that you think is worth pursuing. So there are different ways in which to show that you thought this particular area of interest, area of research being done in the lab is of interest to you, and that you might be a good person to come and work on that area of research. So this, the other aspects of the email are maybe more straightforward. These are things that are just details that will come automatically to you. But when before writing and sending off an email, I think it's useful to think about this particular aspect carefully and frame this aspect well. And then once you have done this, you need to sort of end the email by talking about what you're asking specifically. Yes, you've said that you would like to do an internship, but try and make that a little more specific. When would you like to do an internship? Talk about the length of time you might have to come and spend in that lab. Talk about the dates around which you would like to come and work in the lab. Do you have some source of funding that you can use, or do you expect that you'll be supported during this time? All of these practical details are useful for the faculty to make an evaluation of your suitability for the lab and for the particular project in mind, right? So I think that is important. That once you've spoken about your interests and how they connect to the lab's interest, to end your email by making a specific request along with practical details such as when you can come, how long you can stay, whether you have support, whether you would require support, and so on, right? And it is usually useful, though you have provided information about yourself in the body of the email, you can't provide all the information, right? You can only provide the most relevant details in the body of the email. So it's usually a good idea to attach a CV, a curriculum vitae, which is basically a document that describes what you have done, your education qualifications, your achievements, and so on. And we'll talk a little bit about CVs a little later. It's usually a good idea to attach a CV and importantly to mention you've done so that the person reading the email knows that there is an attachment and goes and looks for it, right? And this is something that would allow the faculty to find other details that you might not have included in the body of the email. And then you sign off, usually your name and some form of greeting. This is again a matter of convention that when you're writing for an academic position in this context, faculty like emails to be somewhat formal, that that indicate that you put some thought into it. So what is important is that that emails are written in a respectful way, are written polite, that you're polite, and that you usually sign off you would sign it off a little differently from if you were writing to a friend. So you might say, yours sincerely, yours faithfully, whatever you're comfortable with. and then put your name at the end of that. This is important, and this is something that I've learned from experience, that it's really important that once you've drafted an email, to read it again. Very often, as you're typing out things, it makes perfect sense to you in your head. It's only when you read it again, you realize that things might not be so clear. You might have made mistakes, repeated words, especially now when we send out so many emails every day. And also with this, things like Gmail have this predictive text, very often, very possible that, without you knowing, you send off something, you write something that you don't mean to write. So it's useful to proofread it. And if it's possible, it's also useful to get someone else to read it before you send it off, just to see if it makes sense. It might make perfect sense to you in your head when you're reading this, but someone else reading it might find things that are confusing that you might not have noticed. So this again, the faculty in the audience can tell me if this is reasonable, but I think that you wait for about a week, and if you don't hear back from faculty, then I think it's fine to send them a reminder, right? There is faculty vary in terms of how busy they are and how on top of their email they are. So, but I think a week is about reasonable for you to send a polite reminder. And the way I do it, because you could do it differently, I usually find it useful to, when I'm sending a reminder to someone about an email that I've sent and haven't heard back about, is to forward the same email again. Because if you send an email saying, okay, I wrote to you a week ago, but I didn't hear back from you, it's possible that in clearing an inbox, somebody might have accidentally deleted your earlier message. It might be difficult for them to find it. So just to make it easier for the person you're writing to, I think it's useful to maybe forward the same email again, saying, I wrote to you a week ago. I've pasted the email at the bottom of this current email, and whenever you have the time, it'll be nice if you can respond to my email. Yeah. So about a week is good to write and again check about an email you might have sent to faculty. So some general points about what many people have said annoys them or irritates them in emails that they see from students inquiring about positions. That what they don't like to see is people copy pasting text from their websites into emails. Like, for instance, you want to say that you're interested in a particular area of research, and you take the exact text that is there in a faculty's email and paste it into your email. That just to the faculty indicates that maybe you haven't. It's not clear from that whether you really are interested, or you've just taken text from the website and pasted it in. So that's something that you should avoid doing. Like I said earlier, receiving a generic email that has been sent to many people, right? So I know for a student, it is important to reach out to a large number of people, because you don't know where you might get an opportunity, and therefore there is nothing wrong with reaching out to a large number of people, but to tailor at least a part of your emails to the specific person you're sending it to, right? Think about it from the point of view of the faculty. They see an email that you've sent to 20 other people. They have no indication about whether you're really interested in the research that's happening in that particular lab, right? They think that you've just sent out an email to 20 different people. So I think it's important to avoid doing this. And indications of this are, addressing an email specifically to an individual, not saying dear sir, madam, talking specifically about the research happening in that person's lab and your connection to that research. All of these things are indicators that you are specifically interested in that individual faculty's lab, right? The other thing is, just being careful, right? Avoiding carelessness. That details. Of course, we all make spelling mistakes. We make errors in grammar, and all of that is fine, right? That this is something that's unavoidable. It depends on how long you've been, how used you are to writing in English and so on. But with details that are easily available from the faculty's website, like the person's name or the institution's name, these are things you need to be careful about. Make sure you spell those correct, because again, they're just indicate that you've been careful about, drafting your email. Similarly, you need to make sure that you're not asking for information that is already available on the websites. Like for instance, if you look at Vishwesha's website, he already has forms for interns to fill up if they're interested in an internship, right? So if you have been to his website and have looked at it carefully, you will know that you don't need to, send out an email to him if you're interested in an internship. You can fill up the form, right? And so if you do send out an email to him, that suggests to him that you haven't looked at his website carefully. So that kind of thing. So, or if someone says that I'm definitely not taking anybody in, I don't have positions in my lab this semester, I'm not going to take anyone. And then you still send an email, then that again suggests that maybe you haven't looked at their website. So these are a few things that you need to be careful about. And the length of the email. I started by saying that, faculty are, many people have said that they receive too many emails, and they really struggle to keep on top of it. So the longer an email is, the more difficult it is for someone to read it entirely. And there's just the tendency to keep putting it off if an email is really long, right? So try as far as possible to keep your email short, and as long as it includes the relevant details as we have just discussed. So what I want to do now is show you one example email that Vishwesha received, and which he thought was an example of a well-written email. What we'll do is maybe take a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes, to read the email, and then we could discuss different parts of the email in the context of the points I just spoke about, right? So maybe just take a few minutes to read this email, and then we'll talk about it in the context of the points I've just discussed. In the meanwhile, if you have any, I'll also check the chat. If you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask me.
Hari, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can I quickly jump in about one particular point?
Sure.
Which you made about copying pasting text from websites into the email. I think very often, as people in academia interested in a subject, we often find passages of text either on websites or papers that perfectly capture what we are trying to say, and we feel that there's no better way to put it than this person already has. Mm-hmm. And so there is the temptation to sort of use the words that somebody else has used already to sort of make our point. But I'm just saying, even if you do feel that there's no better way to put it than it's already been put, it should come from in the words of the person who's writing the email, rather than the potentially perfect block of text that somebody has found.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Umesh. Yeah. So I think that's important to clarify that very often, you want to talk about things that you might have read on a website or in a paper, and want to connect what you've read in a website or in a paper to your own interests. But it's important that that when you're doing that, to try and say, whatever you've seen on the website or the paper in your own words, right? To take the ideas from that and frame it using your own words. And if for some reason you need to, you think it's important to quote something that you've read somewhere exactly as it is in the original paper, then it's important to say you're doing so. So you put it within quotation marks and you provide the name of the source and say you've taken this exactly as it is from the website, and explain why it is important to say it exactly in those words. But otherwise, what Umesh is saying is important. Yes, very often we find that there is a particular passage on a website or or in a paper that we think captures what we are interested in, right? Or what we want to do. But I think it's important to try and, as far as possible, to say it in your own words.
Hari,
Yeah.
You referenced what the faculty might consider reasonable in terms of being reminded.
Yeah.
So some of us are present over here. Speaking on behalf of, sorry, there's some other noise. In a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think faculty often don't reply because, you either have, as Hari, as you said, many emails and many commitments and so on. But I do think most of us feel that, that it is part of our role and obligation to reply to potential, interns and students and so on. So I don't think we mind being reminded. So in fact, I think as students, sometimes you're like, I think you think you're bothering the professor or something like that. But sometimes reminders help us in a way. And I think especially if somebody writes a reminder, which is also well crafted, in a way, it shows persistence and interest in you. It's like, I really want to work with you. And I'm taking the trouble to write another sort of like a shorter, but like a still focused email saying, I'm writing again because your work fascinates me. So I think that I'd like to say that from our side, we actually view reminders as a
positive
thing.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think of that. So, and a reminder suggests that you're not just haven't written to a particular individuals as part of a generic email to 30 people, but that you're specifically interested in that person's work. So I think what Karthik's saying is that faculty view it positively because then this persistence suggests that you are really interested in that particular lab or research group's work. So Karthik, just to follow up on that, so is a week to 10 days a good period to wait?
Absolutely. I mean, it depends on the time frame. I mean, on the scale of things, right? If you're writing for a summer internship that's a few months away, then certainly a week is a good good span of time. Yeah, week to 10 days is I think very reasonable.
Okay, thank you. Something in the chat. Okay, Maria says 2 weeks. So like I was saying, there's a range. So between, maybe 10 days, falls somewhere between a week and 2 weeks. So maybe that's the rule of thumb that we should be using. Okay, yeah. 2 weeks, 1 week is okay-ish, not okay. 10 days is good. 10 days, okay. So there's some consensus on 10 days in the chat. Okay, so just going over this email. By the way, I want to again say that to the participants, please feel free to respond to what I'm saying. If there's something that's not clear or you'd like to add to what I'm saying or talk about your own experiences, you're more than welcome to at any point. What about Deepali asks, what about the gentle reminders? Yeah, so I think so Vishwesha says same rule that a week to 10 days seems like a good rule of thumb to remind people about an email they've sent.
Sorry, can I just jump in there again, Hari? It's
sure.
Easier say stop and type it out.
Yeah.
And this may not be what Dipali meant, but sometimes we do get a reminder which literally the only text in that mail is like, it says gentle reminder with a smiley or an emoji at the end of it. Which is, it's kind of fine. It's like I'm usually amused by that. But if you want to be professional, I would actually like craft the reminder mail itself saying, dear Dr. So-and-so, I wrote to you, Hari, as you described it, right? So as Vishwesha says, gentle or not so gentle, it doesn't matter. But just an email just saying gentle reminder itself may be less effective than another crafted email.
Right. Yeah. So you need to say a little more than, you need to remind them about what you wrote about the first time. So like I was saying, maybe forward the earlier email. And even if you're not doing that, in a couple of lines, recap what you had written to them earlier. I think that is important. Okay, so just to go over this example and discuss it in the context of the conventions we were talking about earlier. So if you look at the subject of the email, what is important to notice here is that the person talks about what the email is about, that they're interested in a project assistant position. And then they also mention specifically the lab. TEE stands for, is the abbreviation for Vishvesha's lab, which is theoretical ecology and evolution. And so Vishvesha knows just by looking at the subject that this is addressed specifically to him, and it's about a project associate position, right? And then if you go to the salutation, the Vishvesha is addressed again by name and by professor. So this is something that you can, I mean, I think, when people use the salutation professor in emails like this, it doesn't matter so much about whether, the exact designation. So professor is a safe, generic salutation to use to faculty. People who are not yet professor, I don't think will mind being called professors. Whereas the opposite might be true with some people, that if they're professor and you only say address them as doctor, they might be a little offended. So either doctor or professor, I think is fine to say in these email salutations. So, and then the next, in a single sentence, this person talks about what he or she has done, mentions the name, the subject they're doing, the place they're doing their degree from, and when they complete it, right? That in a sentence captures all the details that might be relevant for Vishvesha to find out, who this person is and what their background is. And then, like I was saying, this person also specifically that I am writing to express my interest to apply for a project assistant position in your group, right? And then, this is the crux of the email, right? And I think maybe it's useful for us to just read this together. So this person says, my summer internship during the MSc coursework in 2019 and also my MSc project has been on the topics of material science, but having interested to work on the questions that nature possess. I think what is meant is that, questions in ecology and the environment, I decided to make a career switch to the field of ecology. It was during this time I found that I could work on application of my previous knowledge of physics and computation in the field of ecology to find answers to various fascinating questions. So this person's making a connection between, their training and how it might be useful in a new field, right? That they want to make a switch, but they feel that the training and experiences they've already had might be useful in the new field. And then, while finding out the active researchers in this area, I found your paper on noise-induced effects in collective dynamics and inferring local interactions from data from archives. The results of which, by establishing connection between the experimental and theoretical work, has shown that how randomness stochasticity leads to the collective behavior of animals, and how it is dependent on the group size of animals. And how it is dependent on the group size of the animals is interesting and contradictory to what many people, including me, used to previously tend to believe, which is that perturbation causes disorder. Also, I find this research has impactful results on studying various animal groups, as we can provide more experimental evidences to many theoretical works. So what's nice to see is that, this section of the email demonstrates that they've read, a specific piece of research from Vishvesha's group, and they're also able to talk more about how that can be useful and how they can sort of develop that area of research. So all of this, demonstrates to the person you're writing to that you have really put thought into this research, and you're specifically interested in this research and thought about how you could contribute to this area of research, right? I'm just going to take a minute to look at the chat. Let me just. Okay, so thanks. Yeah, so as long as there are faculty responding to the chats, if there's anything that you want me to, I mean, this is addressed to the faculty. If there's anything that you want me to address, can you just unmute yourself and read out the message? Okay.
Yeah, I think, Hari, there's a very relevant message here from Purnima.
Okay.
At times, the faculty don't have anything to offer at the moment. However, they ask to keep in touch. And how does one follow up in those cases? And especially with internships that might be, summer internships or semester-wise internships, which come along periodically. Then, writing to the faculty a few months later saying, I had written to you about so-and-so, and you had asked me to keep in touch. And now, I'm writing to ask whether any opportunities have opened up. That's very helpful. And in fact, there are a couple of interns in our lab, who have joined maybe a few months after they were willing to be able to join.
Okay, right. Okay. Yeah, and this is a point I wanted to make a little later in this presentation, that it's useful to maybe reach out to people, well in advance. If you already know when you're looking for an internship, I think often we all have the tendency of doing things last minute and writing just before or a short while before we need to find a position. But it's useful to start a conversation well in advance, so that you can also, if the faculty thinks that you need to spend some time, say, reading to demonstrate that you're interested, that that gives you that window to have a conversation with the faculty and see if there is a match between what you're interested in and what you bring to the lab and what the faculty wants, right? So I think it's always useful to start a little early. So that the main part of the email is talking about the specific interest that the student has in the research that's being done in the lab, and how he or she is connected to that research, or he or she can contribute to that research. And then, like I was saying, that it's useful to end by talking about practical aspects. Ask for when you might be available, like this person's done. So I've been interested in studying the collective dynamics of animals. As an enthusiastic student, I would like to know if there are any opportunities available with you for the duration of 1 year from March 2021 to March 2022. So this is really useful for the faculty, so they know that this is the window in which the student wants to come and spend time in the lab. March 2021 to March 2022 in any project, as it will be very helpful in my long-term career prospects. I have attached my CV with this email. And I will assure that I will do the assigned work with utmost sincerity, right? So all the useful information is here. So they've told you the period that they'll be available, and then also attached a CV which can provide additional details that might be important for the faculty to make a decision about this application. Okay. Yeah, Deepali, do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, I want to ask that, I have an environmental science background, but I want to try my hand in different labs of biosciences so that I can explore my interest of a research field. So my question is, do faculty also judge on the background of the student while replying to them? Like if I'm trying to apply for the life sciences lab, do they judge me while replying to them because of my background of the study?
Okay. Does anyone want to take this among the faculty?
Yeah, Hari, I can maybe respond. We do take people from many different backgrounds. So basically, the students in their cover letter and CV need to demonstrate that they have done some effort in showing interest. For example, if you are an environmental science student, and if you are writing to work, or say in some area X, what have you sort of tried to do? Have you read some papers? Have you read some articles, books? What really got you interested in the field? For example, in this email that Hari is showing, this person actually has a background in material science, right? but the email sort of demonstrates that why this person is interested in ecology and what has this person done to sort of trying to understand ecology, right? So I think that demonstration has to be there in some way or the other. Of course, there is no one way to show, do this, different people evaluate this in different ways. But you need to show that, despite your different background, you're actually really interested in what you want to do for the your project and application.
Yeah. And also there might be, opportunities to highlight how, coming from a different background might be useful in, a life sciences lab. So maybe to make connections between what you have, the skills and experiences you have from environmental sciences, and how they might be useful to, the research that's going on in a different area. I think that is also often thought of as a plus, a positive when people are inquiring about positions.
Yeah, Hari.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes, I mean, both the points that both you and Vishu made are like spot on. But sometimes we also get mails from people who are sort of like looking for that first step, right? It's like, as Dipali said, in fact, exploring the field for the first time. And if there's, no one willing to give a first break, then, you can't even write with that, like saying, oh, I've done this little something before. But even for that, I think some reading and some sort of illustration like this email does, saying that, I've read a paper and that's why I'm interested. I don't know anything about it, but that's why I'm coming to you, right? To sort of like honestly say I'm coming to you to figure out whether this field is something that it sounds very interesting to me and I want to learn about it. But I've done some at least reading homework that leads me to believe that I should start somewhere, right? At least that much I think is helpful. I mean, just to give you the flip side, you said demonstrate how my experience would be useful in a lab. We get a lot of emails from people saying, I have done a degree in, one of you said in, biotechnology or something like that. And I know how to do, PCR, gel electrophoresis, this, that, and the other. Then this just ends by saying, I think my experience is well suited to your lab. And I'm like, I don't think so, right? Like, but if that person had gone one step further and say, I know you do lab work and do, evolutionary phylogenetics, and, you guys must do DNA sequencing. And those are things that I would be very good at. If you've made that connection, then I'm like, okay, at least I can give you work based on your own skill set. And then you can learn about the rest of what's going on in my lab. So,
yeah, thanks, Karthik. Okay, just to sort of recap what we went over, what faculty would like to see in inquiry emails. They would like emails to be short, brief, and precise, and include all the relevant information, like we just saw. An introduction to where you are and what you've been doing, a demonstration that you have found out about the lab's interests and your connections to the lab's interests, practical details about what exactly you would like to do and when in the lab, and so on. So that I think is important. So of this, the really crucial thing is, to demonstrate that you're specifically interested in that lab's work, right? And this, a number of people have said that this demonstrating specifically that you're interested in particular lab's work is a really, really important thing to do in the emails that you send inquiring about positions. And connected to what Karthik was saying, right? That it's not that everyone has the opportunity to, come into these internships or PhD positions already having some research experience. You might be in a place where there is no opportunity to gain this sort of experience. So I think faculty appreciate, you being frank about how, representing your situation and your circumstances. It's perfectly fine to say that I've had no opportunity, considering where I'm doing my undergrad or master's, to be part of any research project. But yet I'm interested, and if I'm interested, then how do I demonstrate that I have what it takes to do work in your lab, right? And then I'm sure most faculty will be willing to suggest things that you could do, like spending some time reading some of the papers in the lab. And that's why it's also important to start the conversation in advance, to see, can you spend some time, if the faculty is not sure about whether you'd be suitable to work in the lab or not, whether you can spend some time working with the faculty to try and figure this out. So I think that is really, really important. And similarly, if it is fine to say that I have looked at the websites of different labs. I don't have a specific interest. I know that I'm interested in broadly in this area of research, but given that I've never had the opportunity to be part of any of these, I don't have a specific interest, but I would like to find out if I'm interested by spending time in your lab and working on a particular project. That's also fine. I think what is important is to be sort of frank about where you're coming from in terms of thinking about these things, and stating those things sort of upfront in your email. I think all faculty appreciate that. Let me just again look at the chat box.
Actually, we're responding, so it's fine. I think.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Okay, and this, I think this is something that is really important to keep in mind, right? Especially when you're making the transition from, mostly doing courses and, being in classrooms where, there's a teacher who's usually the provider of knowledge and information and wisdom, and you're usually the receiver, to moving to a situation where, you're becoming a researcher, where I think the relationship is very different. Faculty, by taking you into the lab, taking you on as PhD students, are not doing you a favor, right? Because they are getting as much from it as you are getting from it, because faculty are lead, or most faculty have so many research projects, so many different things going on in the lab. They surely can't do all of it on their own. Without students and researchers in the labs, they can't really run these projects. So it's important to remember that the relationship between you and the faculty is more like a mutualism, that both of you are getting something out of it. And so it's perfectly fine for you to, once you've had this initial conversation, to find out if a particular lab is interested in can I request someone's mic is on? Is there a way I can? Yeah. Okay. That once you've had this initial conversation, it is it's perfectly fine for you to find out from the faculty, ask them questions about what you will get out of being in the lab, right? And whether, in some sense, the lab is, what should I say, deserving or worthy of you. So, it's fine to find out about, at the end of your stay in the lab, whether what do you get out of it? Can you be an author on a paper that comes out of it? Is there the possibility of you getting a stipend as being part of it? What are the other sort of support systems in place in the institution for students and interns? It is perfectly fine for you to ask if you can speak to other students in the lab to find out whether the lab is a good place for you to be in. What's the culture, what's the atmosphere in the lab, all of these things. So very often students hesitate to ask these questions because they often feel that maybe faculty are doing them a favor by taking them on in the lab. But I think it's really, really important, because very often you're coming into a lab where you've never been before. You're coming often to a new city, a new institute, and so it is really important to find out if that the place, the lab, the institution, the city you're coming into is a place where you'll be comfortable, and where you can work without any other sort of constraints. So I think finding out these things, so asking, can you speak to other students? I want to find out about the lab. Can I speak to other students in the lab? Can I speak to someone in the institution to find out about how the institution functions and what support there is for interns? All of this is it's perfectly fine to do, and in fact you should be doing it before you decide to join the lab. Maybe the first conversation, the first email you send is not the place to be asking these questions, because one, it makes the email really long, and maybe these are questions you should ask once there is some interest expressed by the faculty about you joining the lab. But this is definitely a conversation you should have with the faculty. Sorry, there's something on the slide which is covered by the bar, but let me go ahead and see. Okay, so right, about writing CVs. How much time do we have? Another 10 minutes?
20 minutes including questions.
20 minutes including questions. Okay, so let me just, this is, writing a CV is probably a session on its own, but I just thought a few important things to keep in mind when you're writing a CV. Firstly, I'd like to say it's never too early to start writing a CV. I often find, hear students saying that there's really nothing to put into the CV, but this is when you should be starting, because this is going forward from your undergrad, master's, postgraduate, you'll need a CV at all points. Anything you apply for, you need a CV. So this is the time to start working on it, even if you think there is not much to put into it right now. And as you go forward and do new things, things will keep getting added to your CV. And it's a document that is constantly evolving. And also it's a really convenient document, right? Because, suppose somebody wants to find out about you, wants to know more about you. It's a document, if you've kept it updated, it's something that you can send out immediately without having to put thought into what needs to go into it. So it's important to start thinking about, and, to have a CV, given where all of you are in your careers, it's important to think about it right now. You can think about, 2 CVs, and this is obviously a problem once you have a lot of material, but once you have a lot of material, to think about a shorter version of it and a longer version of it. And the shorter version is tailored to the particular position or opportunity you're applying for. So you only include the information that's relevant for that particular position. And then you have a longer version that includes everything. And there is nothing that's, especially in the longer version, there's nothing that's irrelevant. Put in every, things to do with your education, your awards, recognition, articles, anything that you might even think is remotely relevant is okay to put into a longer CV, because you don't know who or in what context it might be useful, right? But it's always useful to have a shorter version, which is a page or 2 pages long. So for this context, applying to labs for short-term positions or a project or a PhD position, these are some details that might be particularly relevant. Of course, name and contact details is relevant no matter what. Your educational qualifications, and this means starting from school, going up to bachelor's, master's, PhD. If you have had any research experience, any awards or recognitions you might have received, if you have published articles, both technical journal articles as well as articles you might have published in magazines, in newspapers, in other languages, all of this is important. If you've made any presentations at conference, and other skills and interests that you might have that are relevant to the position you're applying for. So this is an important thing. To usually CVs are organized going from the most current to the oldest. So like, for instance, if you take educational qualifications, right on top, you'll put your most recent educational qualification. And then from that, you work downwards to going back to, say, if you're doing your master's now, you start with master's, then BSc, then 12th, and so on, right? Because people reading the CV are usually most interested in what you've done most recently, and so they would like to see that on the top. And similarly for the other sections as well, whether it's research experience or publications, start with the most recent publication and then work your way downwards to the older ones from there. Yeah, this is important. You need to tailor your CV to the position you are inquiring about applying for. What does that mean? Some examples. So if you're applying for a particular position where you think certain skills that you have might be important, then to highlight that in some way, using a font or text, bolding it or something, or put it more prominently in your CV. And similarly, the different sections in your CV you can order based on what you think is important for a particular position, right? So your CV, there's a long CV which has everything and doesn't change so much. This stuff keeps getting added to it. But the short CV that you're sending for specific positions needs to be tailored for the position you're applying for, or the opportunity you're interested in. This again, maybe not so important at the stage of looking for an internship or a master's project, but beyond a PhD and onwards, this is something that many places would ask for. It's useful to, identify 2 or 3 people who are interested in you, who have your best interests in mind, and who will be willing to provide a letter of reference if asked. So you could provide their names in the CV and tell them that, it's important to tell them that include them as referees in your CV, get their permission for it, and then, tell them that you might receive requests from people for a recommendation letter, right, for your candidature for something. Okay, so I'm going to end with this, and then we could, if there are questions, we could take questions and have a discussion. But I think, so far we've been talking about things that you need to do, students need to do, to, improve the likelihood that your emails are read by faculty, improve the likelihood that you secure positions, internships, projects, PhD positions in these labs, right? But I think, especially given the context, the motivation for this workshop, I think it's also important to acknowledge that, there are other sort of larger issues that not everyone has the same opportunities to, secure training that's relevant for, these positions. There are all kinds of structural disadvantages that disfavor some people over others. So there is this larger issue, and it's upon us, meaning people like me and the faculty, to also think about these issues, right? And what might be some examples of them, right? So we often say that when applying for positions, prior research experience is important. But of course, not everyone has the opportunity to gain prior research experience, right? Only some people can afford to take on unpaid internships. Only some people can afford to take a break from their studies to go and work on a project. So prior research experience might be possible and might be easier for certain people over others. Similarly, not everyone has access to good training in spoken and written English. And this often is important in, say, entrance examinations for PhD positions. It becomes important in interviews for such positions. Again, this is in some sense unfair, because certain people come into it, with training, having studied in English medium schools all the time, whereas others have not had that opportunity. And similarly, there are, in the interview process, this is just human nature, human behavior. There are all kinds of unconscious biases that might creep into, our thinking on the part of interviewers in, interviews for positions. You sort of, again, privilege good English. You might, without you knowing it, you might value a candidate from a well-known college over someone who's not from such a well-known college. So all of these are big issues, maybe more important than the specific things that you've spoken about in this workshop. But these are not things that are going to be solved, anytime in the near future. These are sort of larger issues that people need to keep chipping away all the time. So what we have spoken about today is, in the form of what you could do given this current system, which is not an entirely fair system. Given this system, what might sort of improve your chances of securing these positions in these labs, or at least to start with, get your emails read by faculty when you send emails to them. But these larger issues are also things that the faculty and people like us need to deal with. So I'll stop here, and I wanted to say that at any point, if you want to discuss any of these issues further, or more broadly about things that have been covered in the workshop, you're most welcome to write to me. That's my email ID. So don't hesitate to write to me to get clarifications from this workshop or any other issues related to the other topics and broader motivations of this workshop. Yeah, thank you so much. And I and all the faculty will be happy to take more questions. Is there anything in the chat? Okay. So anything else that any of you would like to add, faculty, or other questions from anyone? All the activity seems to be on the chat. Okay, I'm assuming everything's been responded to now on the chat.
I think so. We've been trying to do that. But if
Okay.
we've missed anything, people raise your hands at this point.
Okay. Anything else from the faculty? Or if there isn't, we could maybe break. And Vishwesha, when we come back after the break?
We started 3:30 again.
Okay. Yeah. So if there's nothing else right now, like I said, you're most welcome to write to me at any point if you want to follow up on this conversation or discuss anything else. So thank you so much.
So no more
Yeah,
questions from anyone? Okay. Okay, great. So we'll start at 3:30 again. So no need to log out. No, enough need to log out. We'll just leave this the way it is. That way we can avoid the admission process. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
You can just mute yourself.
Thanks, Hari.
Umesh, you want to say something?
No, I just said thanks to Hari.
Yes, yes, yes. Lots of thanks to Hari.
Hi, Hari. So I've just posted a question from the YouTube chat onto this chat. So anyone can answer that.
Thanks, Pranav. I'll take a look.
Hari, I can answer the last one again as faculty.
Okay.
No, I think this is, one. I understand the question that you approach someone and you're grateful for getting an offer from them, and then you're like, you know what, I got something else, and not coming. I think that's that's the wrong way to look at it, in the sense that as faculty we should, if you're not, we should all be aware that students have to approach several different options, and if you do get different options, then you're going to pick the one that that you find the most attractive to you. This is as Maria Thakur says, don't feel bad. We get too many requests and we can't accommodate them. Similarly, we understand that you have to keep trying in different places, and if you get multiple options, the choice is yours. I think what we appreciate is people writing us a polite mail and saying, I got this opportunity in this other lab, which really suits my interests, and that's why as I've taken up that offer. And perhaps you might even want to come back to this faculty at a later point in time and approach them again, saying, that perhaps I might work. May I have an opportunity to work with you next summer or in future? So I don't think it's something that you need to feel bad about at all, as everyone else is sort of emphasizing in the chat.
I'd like to add just a little bit to what you said, Karthik. As we hope that you get multiple offers and you get to choose, right? That is the aim here, that you write to a whole bunch of faculty, some say yes, some say no, and then you have choices. But if that doesn't happen, and it can be the case, right, that everybody says no, and it was just a bad luck or bad year, everybody's lab's full, whatever that may be, don't feel bad to write to the same faculty again, like at the top of your list, for example, and say, hey, really did try to get opportunities elsewhere, and others said no for various reasons. Could you reconsider? Right? And you make it a no, but at least if you need to come back to any faculty that you really like to work with, come back, make your pitch again, explain to them that you sought out other opportunities and you weren't able to get it, and you'd really like us to reconsider.
Can I also add? I mean, I think going back to the case where you have multiple offers, the faculty. Sorry about the noise. The faculty are through interviews and through other processes, we're choosing the best students from, or the ones that are best matched to us, right? So I think reciprocally, it's equally fair for students to choose who they think is the best match for them. I mean, so this works both ways. We're making choices about you. You guys can make choices about us. And yeah, so I think that's totally fine. And the other thing I want to say is that we have a lot of students, and many different interns, many different students will pass through our lab. Whereas the internship that you do and the PhD that you do will define your life. So that decision is more important for you than it is for us. This is not as Hari said, this is a mutualism, but it's not an equal relationship in the fact that if one student chooses not to join our lab, it's not going to wreck our research program, right? Whereas the choices that you make define what you will do over the next 5, 10, or even 10 years, or even your career. So feel confident and, don't hesitate to make those choices.
Hi, can Arun make me and Seshadri the co-host? Okay.
Hi, Tanvin, you can start now. So we're going to start the. We have 1 more minute. Take 1 more minute.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. We still have 1 minute. Then we'll start.
Hey, Sesh, nice to see you.
Hi, Niall. Good to see you.
You're looking very well.
Thank you. We have a bunch of participants online already, and we're just waiting for a minute for people to join in.
Excellent.
Hi, Bharat.
Hi.
Hi, Arkamitra.
How things?
No.
Hi. We are waiting for Utpal to join in. Okay.
Should I start with the introductions while we wait for others to join?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you can start. I mean, I'm going to reach out to Utpal in a minute.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here. Today, we have about 9 panelists for this very interesting workshop on careers in ecology. Before we start, we just want to mention that this session is being recorded and also live streamed on YouTube. Also, if you have any questions from the panelists, you can either like unmute yourself and ask them directly, or you can put your questions in the chat box and we will read out to them. So what is this workshop about? I'll just quickly share my screen. Yeah. One second. Okay. So this workshop is about careers in ecology, but a lot of people have this question, what do I do after a PhD? Do I continue doing research, or are there other options that are available and haven't been explored much? So today we're kind of just trying to give you a sense of the different domains of jobs that one can pursue after doing a PhD in ecology. These include entrepreneurship, working in policy, journalism, management, science communication, education, conservation, or something related to creative arts, and even job in the industry, say, sorry, I think, say in the field of data science or writing or publishing. Or it could be entirely something that we haven't heard about yet. So just to kind of give you a sense of what people have already done or what people are already doing. After a PhD in ecology, we have designed this workshop. And this workshop is divided into 2 panels. So in the panel 1, okay. So in the panel 1, so I'm so sorry. Yeah. So Seshadri will kind of introduce you to the panelists in our panel 1. And after having an introduction with people from panel 1, we will have a short discussion and we will take your questions. After that, we will have the introduction by the panel number 2, and we will have another round of question and answers. And then we will open question and answers to the whole panel. So over to you, Seshadri.
Thanks, Tanveen. Hi, everyone. I'll take a few minutes to quickly introduce, list out the panelists. They'll do their own introductions. We have in the first panel, Dr. Manisha Bhattacharya. She is a former PhD from the Center for Ecological Sciences, and she will talk about her work. We have Dr. Neil McCann, who is a wildlife presenter. That's how I know him, but he has a different side to his career, and he'll talk to you about those things. Then we have Dr. Sudhira, who is the founder of Guppy Labs and Research Matters. Followed by we have Dr. Utpal Smart, who is a postdoctoral researcher, and he'll be talking about his work. And in the first panel, we have Varat Giri, who we all know as a herpetologist, but again, he has different phases to his career. And with that brief introduction, I'll open it up for our panelists to talk to you about their work. While they are talking about their work, you can type in your questions. We'll keep note of them and ask them at the end of their introductions.
Also, one additional thing, if
Manisha,
you have your, sorry, just to the participants, if you have a question to a specific panelist, you can write that down in the question in the chat box as well. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Seshadri and Tanveen, first of all, for organizing something like this, which is very interesting, and I'm sure would be very informative for the participants. And thanks for inviting me. So yeah, so I work in the data science field. It would be more appropriate to say I work in the field of AI, artificial intelligence. So I work in Accenture, and what my department in Accenture or my team in Accenture does is that we are mostly involved with training, internal Accenture training, and research in the field of artificial intelligence. So right, so that's what we do. So Tanveen had given us a detailed list of these 3 questions that we should prepare and tell you all about, which would make it easier for everybody to understand how the shift happens. So what I did in my PhD, I worked in I was in Rohini Balakrishnan's lab. I worked in the field of sensory ecology. So I looked into cricket behavior, to put it in one line. But how that helped me in data science is that, so data science is all about, as in machine learning or deep learning. It would appear to be a lot of math, but actually it's a field of statistics. It is an extension of statistical learning. And during my PhD, though I come from a microbiology background, during my PhD in CES, I had to do a lot of stats. Thanks to Kavita, thanks to Vishu, we were exposed to various techniques. We were exposed to R as a programming language. We were exposed to different kinds of statistical models. To understand those models, we were exposed to different kind of distributions, how to understand distributions and go about that. So that I think was the main thing which helped me in making the shift, because I self-taught myself machine learning and deep learning. But when I was learning about, when I was going through textbooks and MOOCs about machine learning and deep learning, it was easy for me to pick up the techniques, to understand these techniques, because I think because I had this already a good background in statistics. So that's one. B, I think what most engineers miss out when they come into data science, when they're making the shift into data science, is that they're very good coders. They might understand the math very well, but they are not trained into data. They don't know how to figure out what's happening with data. So that was the other thing I took to industry from my PhD, is that I could look into a data set and tell you what's wrong with it or what to be done with it, what kind of analyses should be applied to it. So that's the second thing that helped me. And I think third, with not to a great extent, but it of course helps, is that I also had to do simulations during my PhD. So I had an introduction into programming. So that's the three things which helped me change my field. Tanveen, what was the third question that I was supposed to answer?
What would be your recommendations for somebody who wants to get into such a field? Yeah.
Okay, for data science, I think just statistics mainly. First of all, stats and math, to get a good background into stats and math. And yes, and if you can pick up programming, so much better. I think data, all ecologists will be dealing with it, and because the problem with data science is completely different from what we face in ecology. In ecology, we, especially if you're doing experimental stuff, we have very, very few data points, and most of our thinking goes into how to make that significant. But in data science, you will have a lot of data, so there's no dearth of data there. But what I'm trying to say is that the exposure to data you'll get, but if you can build a strong foundation of statistics and if you can get a good introduction into programming, that really helps to launch yourself into the field of data science if you choose to. So yeah, that's it from my side. And anything else should I cover, Sheshadri, Tanvi, or should we just take it up when the questions come?
I think this is excellent. I think
cool.
We can, any questions, comments, we can take it up when the discussion opens up.
Cool.
Thank you. Can I now invite Dr. Niyal to give a brief bio of himself?
By all means, thanks, Desh. So I'm Niall McCann. I'm a National Geographic explorer. I'm trustee of the Royal Geographical Society and the Wallacea Trusts. I'm director of conservation for National Park Rescue, the rotating chair of the Global End Pandemics Alliance, and I dabble a little bit in wildlife television, which is where I met Sheshadri while making a documentary about king cobras 2 years ago down in Karnataka. The main thing that I do day to day is that I run an NGO called National Park Rescue. National Park Rescue is a direct action conservation organization, which means that we design and implement our projects rather than acting as a donor in the conservation field. So we work with national parks in Southern Africa that cannot cope with the poaching crisis, and we resuscitate them. The way we do that is through a combination of law enforcement and community engagements, with the latter, of course, being by far and away the most important factor. I'm also involved through my work with National Park Rescue in a lot of political lobbying, particularly here in the United Kingdom, where I'm trying to ensure that the government puts the environment at the heart of our domestic and international policy. And governments are starting to realize that this is absolutely necessary, that there is no planet B, we cannot survive on a planet with complete breakdown of ecosystems and landscapes. And if we neglect our environment, we are neglecting ourselves. So there is a burgeoning understanding of the importance of a One Health approach to our economy and the way we treat the planet. And COVID-19 has, of course, brought that to the fore. And I'm doing my best to try and bang our government's head so they understand this is absolutely necessary, even if it's not necessarily an immediate job winner. The other thing that I do a little bit of is television, as I briefly mentioned. So I've been lucky enough to present 3 seasons of a program on human-wildlife conflicts, and I was one of the 3 people that wasn't David Attenborough on the latest David Attenborough program as well. Normally the BBC are quite possessive, and it's only Sir David. But on this latest series, which is known as A Perfect Planet, 3 others of us were allowed in to hog the screen for a little bit of time. Myself, a wonderful marine scientist from Sri Lanka called Asha Vos, and an economist called Jeremy Rifkin. And that was a great privilege because of the number of people that program reaches. And this is where television can be quite useful. It gives me and others in the industry an opportunity to talk to millions of people in the way that as a research scientist, it's very difficult to do. When I was doing my PhD, the papers that I was having published would be read by 10 or 20 people, all of whom I know from the Tapir conferences that I was going to. Whereas with television, you do have that opportunity to reach a much wider audience. For me, it is not enough. I wouldn't just want to do television. I feel there's much more that needs to be done, but it's a wonderful vehicle for encouraging people to take an interest in the natural world, which is one of the things that I'm trying to do in my career. So for my PhD was on that animal behind me, which is Baird's tapir. There are 4 species of tapir in the world, one of which lives in Central America. And I spent 5 years doing my PhD. It took a very long time because I was distracted with television and other things. It was hugely important to me. My PhD was on the conservation of that species in Honduras, involved in a lot of spatial analysis, conservation genetics, the use of GIS and those types of skills. And that was very important, building those skills and adding those to my toolkit. But for me, the most important thing about doing a PhD was that it confirmed that I didn't actually want to have a career in academia, which isn't necessarily what you imagine when you go into a PhD. You might think that actually the obvious thing to do is for me to end up as a sandal-wearing professor in 30 years' time. But for me, I realized that actually my PhD taught me I didn't want to do that. I'm hugely glad I have it. I'm hugely glad I did it. But it confirmed that my energies were better expended outside of academia rather than inside academia. Now, a PhD does give you a lot of analytical skills. It gives you autonomy. But for me, most importantly, it surrounds you with a network of talented people. And I think that's something to really focus on whenever you're entering any stage of academia, from undergrad to masters to PhD. The people that you are around, that are your cohort, are going to be brilliant. They will be talented, intelligent, enthusiastic, and that network is worth really nurturing because they will come back to help you as your career goes on. The number of things that I've ended up doing in my life with people that I did my undergraduate degree with, my PhD with, nurture that network and feed off their enthusiasm and their talent. PhD is often a necessary qualification to get you into the door in some places, and so it's a useful means to an end in that terms as well. It does make a difference to have doctor in front of your name in many cases, certainly in what I do whenever I'm talking with governments. The fact that I'm Dr. Niall McCann does make a difference than if I was just Mr. Niall McCann. So it's a useful means to an end as well. And when it comes to pursuing a career like mine, goodness, I've not had a regular career. It has been irregular. And I think one of the keys to what I've done is I've said yes to lots of things. So say yes more is a great mantra to live by. Saying yes to everything is absurd, obviously. No human being can do that. But keeping yourself open to opportunities is vital. It's also important to say that nobody's career path is a straight line. It's not as if at the age of 19, when I entered my undergraduate, I knew exactly where I would be in 20 years' time, now that I'm 39 years old. My career path is a wiggle, and there's branches that didn't work, and times when I've had to go back on myself. My interests have also changed over time, and so my career has changed with it. And so I would suggest to everyone, don't be too intimidated by the career maze ahead of you. Keep your eyes open to opportunities, build and maintain your network, and follow your passions. Good luck.
Thank you so much. It was really nice to hear you speak and give all those advice. We'll come back to some of the thoughts that you shared in a bit. Next, can I invite Dr. Sudhira to talk to us, please? Sudhira, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks Sheshadri and Tamim for inviting me. It's nice to get back to CS always in that sense. So very briefly, I've been in and out of CES for some time. I was 17 when I just first came in after my +2 and was a summer research fellow with the Indian Academy of Sciences, and I was working in Professor Gadhakar's lab. Then went on to do my undergrad in engineering and then came back as a project assistant at CES, and then went out for my master's, came back for my PhD at IISc. I was an interdisciplinary student with management studies, Astra, and almost at CES. So I spent significant time rather at CES back then. But I guess one of the important things out there, I think, is the opportunity to learn very diverse things. Something I quite remember and sort of follow diligently is something Professor Gadhakar said very early, as in is to keep reading and expand your horizons. As in, perhaps I was too young then, and so he sort of nudged me to read a lot of books. So all I was used to do when I came in early was spend time in the CS library and went on to read a lot of books and something like that. As in, that really helped. The other thing that while at CES and at IISc in general, I think that really helped is are all the lot of talks that are organized. ESS used to also be very active, and we had a lot of talks by ESS, and of course there was a lot of other student groups looking around, and a bunch of them where we would invite talks from eminent personalities and other thought leaders across, and I'm sure that also helped a lot. In another sense, like what Niall's articulating us to build networks also. As students, you also get the opportunity to reach out to anybody. As in, we could reach out to Ramchandra Guha and invite him for a talk, or anybody like that. As in, so you build networks along, and then also get to sense of to get to know what's happening and things like that. While part of my formal studies, I think I echo with what Manisha said on learning statistics. I think that's so super critical and fundamental for any of us to actually dabble with multiple domains, and so to say. It really helped a lot because I was also doing courses in management studies where we would call it as econometrics. And back at CES, I would find Shakal and Rolf with the book titled Biometrics. And except the examples that would be different, you see bulk of the fundamentals are the same. So if I cross across this campus, it was called econometrics, and this side of the campus, it was called biometry. Pretty much the same in terms of the theory and concepts. I think that was really very useful for me to kind of apply across, and also dabble in social sciences as well, and so on. So that was super useful. The other thing I would really like to urge students at large is, like, again, what Niall said, follow your passions. So whichever subject you find it interesting, there are a host of courses offered by faculty at IISc. For instance, there is this course by Professor Narahari on game theory. I'm sure he would be still offering it in CSA. So after my compre, I was like generally curious, so I went and audited the course. So in the sense, there is no limitation as long as your advisors are okay. You just have to make sure you go and attend different courses that are interesting. Although you don't necessarily need to apply it in your thesis per se, but I think it will be a good eye-opener for you to get a hang of what's going on. And pretty much the rigor that is followed at IISc at large, I think helps you to kind of get hold of things on any of those things easily. That really helps. The other thing that also really helped for me is when during my PhD, I ended up interning with the state government and city corporation. So that opened up a lot of different things for me. And the access happened because the commissioner happened to visit IISc and struck a conversation with him, and he was happy to have me as an intern. Again, one of the few folks who ended up as an intern at the city corporation. But I think all of this happens because of the networks and the kind of interactions that you would possibly do while at IISc, which I think one should really sort of very carefully cultivate and make sure of it. So incidentally, post PhD, while I worked with the state government for a while and all that, I now run Gubi Labs and also Research Matters, which is a science communication platform. At Gubi Labs, we work on 4 verticals, primarily on research, and also do a bunch of courses, which is the second vertical. The third vertical is consulting and advisory practices. The fourth vertical happens to be on science communication. When we started dabbling with science communication, we did sort of help set up the Science Media Center at IISc. And we now continue to sort of work with a host of institutions across the country, including IIT Bombay or the Office of Principal Scientific Advisor and so on. And there are a host of things that one could do, as in, as a researcher, I think like when you do your PhD, what you really get is sort of a license to do your research. And that really opens up you to kind of literally navigate yourself into any area of interest that you think is really exciting for you. I think all it matters end of the day is your passion and interest there. With that, you could really dive into in different fora, different areas where you think it is really exciting. So through Gubi Labs, we've dabbled across, as in, I was sort of tempted to see what Tanveen shared in the first slide there, different aspects, right? So we are into a bit of journalism, we are into conservation, we are into science communication, we are into research, a whole bunch of things that we are doing. We're just following our passion and trying to do things that are, but all of it has been really has happened primarily because of all the fine training and the fundamentals that were built while at CES. I think that is very crucial. So now while you're students there, as long as you're there, you make sure you sort of cement your fundamentals to the best and possibly gather as much as knowledge and acquire as much as skills as possible. That will really take you a long way. I'll leave it at this now. If there's anything, I'll be happy to come back or respond to that. Sheshadri and Tanveen, let me know if that was sufficient for now.
No, I think it was excellent. It's a good overview of what you do and how you work there. And we can take up questions when we open up. For the next panelist, we have next 2 panelists. May I invite Dr. Utpal to talk about how he now dabbles in forensics. Utpal, over to you.
Thank you, Sheshadri. It's really nice to be interacting with people back in India again, the academia. It's been a while. I think the last time I interacted with IISc was 2015 when Dr. Karanth invited me to talk about my PhD dissertation. So thank you for inviting me. Also, I just want to give you a heads up that it's 4 o'clock in the morning here in Texas. So if I fumble with my words, please excuse me. I have the strongest Desi brew coffee here, so I hope I can be sharp and be on my toes. But so I guess looking at the rest of the panelists here, it looks like I was chosen to be the control group, right? Because I'm still pretty much in academia and heading towards what you would call a regular boring academic career. But I think I've had a very unconventional trajectory to my education, which might encourage people from different backgrounds to be able to be successful in ecology and evolution, or just science in general, right? So I like to divide my career in 3 phases, right? 3 distinct phases. There's the Shakespeare phase, the Odum phase, and then the Darwin phase. I'll explain to you what I mean by that. So I started off as I got my bachelor in arts in English literature in the Sri Aurobindo International School of Education in Puducherry, right? I had always been interested in wildlife and natural history. I used to go and help rescue snakes from houses around me, and I used to go horse riding. I used to go snorkeling. So there was always that inclination towards wildlife, right? And then all of a sudden, for the 3 years, I actually quit biology in college because they told me I used to struggle with mathematics, right? And I think a lot of you can sympathize with that. So I was literally told that science is not my cup of tea by one of my professors, and that really discouraged me, and I quit biology. So I didn't get a lot of the foundational stuff that I should have. So I wrote poetry, I studied Shakespeare, I did all sorts of things that are not biology during my graduate years. Then I actually decided almost on a whim that I wanted to get into ecology. So I joined the MS program, right? The master's program in ecology and environmental sciences in Pondicherry University. I was exposed to, I started learning my biology. I was thrown at the deep end of the pool, as they say, right? Because I was competing with colleagues who had degrees in biotech and whatnot. But my passion for wildlife is what kept me going. For my thesis research, I got to work on cane turtles with Dr. Karthikeyan Vasudevan, I think popularly known as KV, with his students. And that kind of pivoted me into, like a proper passion for ecology and herpetology. So this is the Odum phase, right? I'm the father of ecology. I also, after doing the master's, I applied for PhD programs all over, and I happened to get through with Eric Smith, who is a professor at UTA, and he's a herpetologist. But he does systematics, right? He does taxonomy systematics. He doesn't do ecology. And when I met him in India during a herp conference, he basically tricked me into joining his lab, saying that he did ecology. And once I came over, he basically said, no, we don't do ecologies. So now I was faced with having to learn systematics and molecular phylogenetics, which I had no background in. But once I got into it, I found it interesting. And like I said, evolution and ecology are two sides of the same coin, right? So my PhD dissertation was on coral snakes of Asia, old world coral snakes. And I also got to do about a year of fieldwork in Indonesia, which is amazing. We collected a lot of different species. So Eric is mainly a taxonomist, but his students do a lot of biogeography, phylogenetics, things like that. So I had the good fortune of describing a lot of new species, several new genera of toads and frogs, and we described a new species of coral snake. And so this is the Darwin phase, right? It's when I started dabbling with evolution, and I liked it, right? So I continued. However, it is hard to, at least in this part of the world, and I don't know about India right now, but academia can be a challenging career. It's grueling sometimes. The competition is hard. So the only thing that keeps you going, is your passion for the field. So how did I end up in forensics, right? So I'll wrap that up. I got tired of doing the same kind of cookie cutter phylogenetic trees, and typical you just run a software without really knowing what you're doing. But because it spits out a tree or something, right? Anyone can use it. So I decided to do something completely different so that I could build a different foundation, because I think looking at science from different perspectives or fresh perspectives really helps. So I managed to, I got in touch with this person at Center for Human ID, which is where I currently work as a postdoc, which is basically a forensics lab. So I'm part of the research and development of team of the Center for Human ID. It's run by Dr. Bruce Bedoli, and I realized after I joined that he actually was the main scientist for the FBI, right? So he set up the genetics lab at Quantico, and here he was, I was rubbing shoulders with him. It blew my mind. And I also got to meet a lot of FBI people and other things when we go out to conferences. So it's been really interesting. So the main thing is forensic genetics is basically PubGen, right? So I'm not doing anything different from what I did with my snakes and frogs. Only instead of looking at herbs, I'm looking at Homo sapiens. So and now I've started projects with colleagues on wildlife forensics, right? Because everything has to come back to wildlife with me. So I guess all I want to say is, even though you get to your goal in many different ways, right? There's not one way to go, and you should be open to new fields and new ideas. In fact, those are advantages. And like my English literature degree really helped me write scientific papers, right? That's been one of my biggest assets. So never underestimate the power of other foundations, I guess.
Excellent. Thank you, Utpal. I didn't realize it was 4 a.m. for you. My apologies. I should have checked with you about the time.
No, it's fine.
But this was an excellent overview. I learned a lot from this as well. Thank you so much. I think I'll invite now our last speaker for the first panel, Dr. Varad Giri. Varad, over to you.
Thank you, Sheshadri. I think it's indeed a pleasure listening to quite a lot of people from diverse backgrounds. And the moment you asked me to come and talk about this, about careers and blah, blah, blah. So I started asking questions to myself that why I'm here, why I joined biodiversity, whatever I'm doing. I just asked that question to myself, like why I'm doing it. And the answer is, I don't know. That gives me the boost. Like every moment you go into the forest, it gives you something, and which pulls you there. Like I think many times I decided to leave this field, and we stumbled upon something very interesting. Okay, just to talk about my education background, I belong to a small village in Karnataka, where still today people don't know science and biodiversity, things like that. And then for the first time during my master's, I realized that there is something called bird watching. We used to watch birds in the college, but of a different kind. Okay, birds without feathers. Okay, so the first time we started looking at birds, and I was really fortunate enough to have a mentor who guided us in a very, very professional way to the bird watching, because he asked us to watch the bird first, look at all the characters, and then look at the books. And then why that bird it belongs to that genus, why that bird belongs to that species. It started like that, and then I'm talking about 1995. And there was one institute called Bombay Natural History Society. It's one of the oldest non-governmental organizations in India. And it was my dream to join them. But I realized that without PhD, they will not take me in. And then I tried my level best to get my PhD degree, because I feel that in India, PhD is something which is considered as one of the prime things. And I was behind that. But I was really fortunate enough to go to BNHS for doing some reference work. Today, where we are sitting in different corners of the world and talking because of the internet. And I'm talking about the era when there was no internet. We have to read the magazines and look at the references in the magazines, write down on that paper. And to do that work, I visited Bombay Natural History Society. And as I told you, luck pulls you, on the same day, there was a walk-in interview. And I was asked to give the interview. And I realized that one of the biggest hurdles I have is I can't speak in English. My English was really, very poor. Okay, but I decided to go ahead and face that challenge. And I faced that challenge, and they said like, yes, great, you performed really very well. And we are taking you in herpetology section. My dream was to join BNHS. What section was immaterial. And I said, great, I'm joining from tomorrow. They said, no, 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 don't be so excited. Go back, finish everything and come back. But they said, you have a job in herpetology section. I came out of that interview room and started asking people, what is herpetology? So that was the beginning. I said, man, I'm joining in some section which I really don't know. And this is the fact. Okay. And I'm still answering that question. After joining Bombay Natural History Society, prior to that, I was a snake catcher. I used to catch snakes. I used to free handle snakes. I used to kiss cobra. I used to do everything, which today I say that is bad. Okay, because I know that that doesn't help you in any way. But that intention of I told you the bird watching, serious bird watching, helped me to look at snakes in that way. So when I started looking at snakes in a different way, like why that snake in that genus. So I used to know that there are few snakes because the book we used to refer at that particular point of time was Book of Indian Reptiles by J.C. Daniel. That was the only resource available. And I used to feel that those many snakes are there in the world or in India. The moment I joined BNHS, they have a huge collections. And I was in charge of that collection, of the amphibian reptile collection. And it was like a new door open for me. The moment I realized that, oh, this is something else. What I know is nothing. Okay, because at that particular point of time, I used to feel that I know so many things. But the moment I saw the collection, I realized that I really don't know anything. Then I met a person called Ashok Captain. And he asked me like, hey, Bharat, why don't you do taxonomy? I said, oh, what is this? I don't know what the taxonomy means. He said, I will tell you. And then he started giving me the basic lessons of taxonomy. And over the last 20 years, I'm trying to look at amphibians and reptiles of India with that particular notion, trying to understand what diversity we have. Try to go to different corners of India, try to interact with people, try to understand the diversity. So for that, we started with the species which are already described, the endemic species, point endemic species, because those species were known, and after that, nobody went and looked at them. So we started going there, looking at them. So we started revising the taxonomy. In doing all those things, we interacted with quite a lot of people. Amazingly, we got some great people from Natural History Museum, London, like David Gower, Mark Wilkinson. They used to come to visit BNHS. I started interacting with them. I started interacting with Aaron Bauer of Villanova University. So all that thing started exposing me to a different field. I started understanding herpetology in a different way. And in the last 20 years, probably, I don't know how many species, but more than 50 species we have been, we managed to describe from India. And in a country like India, where 50% diversity is undescribed, I feel that this is nothing. Then I realized that taxonomy is okay. But is that helping in any way? And then the question was, no, I don't know. Then I started looking at their behavior, started looking at their habitat preferences, started looking at their distribution, because any conservation strategy can be effectively managed if we have this understanding. Otherwise, it is of no use. No, if I describe 100 species, that is not going to help biodiversity in any way. But if I tell you that, no, this is a frog, this breeds in this season, this requires this much, this kind of habitat, that is going to help in conservation. So I started looking at that aspect again. Fortunately, while learning, I realized that in the field of Indian herpetology, we don't have many people. So we started conducting programs. We started conducting training programs for the people, and too many people joined. For the last more than 15 years now, we are conducting these programs for people, and we're trying to encourage citizens to do science. So that is helping us in many ways now. The best example, R. Chaitanya, who joined as in one of the courses in 2014, and with the IT background, information technology background. He never studied biology in his life, and today he's one of the leading herpetologists in India. In last 6 years, he described around 20 new species to science. And today he's doing PhD in herpetology. So this is what is the power of citizen science. Okay. So if you have a passion, you can do wonderful things. Eventually, I realized that lizards feed on spiders, lizards feed on insects, lizards feed on birds, lizards feed on mammals as well. Means I need to understand the biodiversity in totality. So how to go ahead? For the last 3 years, I started a small initiative called NIDUS. You can see it here. Okay, and that particular initiative is heading to answer these questions. So, and another thing what we realized that I work in Northern Western Ghats, where too much of private forest is there. The forest is owned by people. Okay, and that needs protection because the protected areas are already protected. Going there and understanding the biodiversity there is okay. But if I start looking at biodiversity outside the protected area, that will again bring in quite a lot of interest and things like that. So we started this project, and now we have 3 small projects running. One is we are looking at the biodiversity of Myristica swamps in Goa, and there are 2 projects in Goa, one in Maharashtra, 100-acre private forest, pristine forest, where there are reports of tigers, and there is 225 hectares of forest in Goa. And this entire study we are doing with the help of citizens. No, the people who are dedicatedly interested in biodiversity, they are joining us now, and the people who are the expert in this field, they are training them. No, so we're trying to bridge a gap because see, in biodiversity scenario in India, the academics is really very tough. Getting a job is impossible because there is too much of competition happening. Then, as you join as an academician, because I work with Bombay Natural History Society, I work with National Center for Biological Sciences, and over a period of time, I realized that no, if you have a dream to work for the citizens, then you have to have your own domain. And that's why we started this, because we are encouraging citizens to come and do science. And interestingly, quite a lot of new things are coming up. Recently, we did a survey in a small patch, and we come across maybe around 50 different species of spiders, and how many insects we don't know. So, all these things are happening. So, I feel that what we need is a sheer passion towards the biodiversity. For biodiversity, or if you want to do a career in wildlife, believe me, life is wild here. No, if you expect something great, like if you want a BMW and a 3-story building, I think this is not a field. But if you want to enjoy in totality, if you want to get a proper sleep, I think this is the field. Okay, and again, what I would like to request here is, because I was listening to all the people, look at Nile. Nile has taken the leap from many things. Look at Utpal. Utpal has done quite a lot of interesting stuff. So when I talk about academy today, statistics and bioinformatics and all this, all lab-based. If you have a very strong understanding of lab-based things, you can become a good academician, because you publish papers with high impact factor journals. But what is happening to that animal in the wild? How many people are looking at it? Are we really going into the forest and looking at these frogs? I know people who talk about biogeography of a particular species of things very heavily. But the moment they see that animal, they can't identify. So what I mean to say that, it's like there's a tremendous opportunity in every aspect. Thank you.
Hey, Bharat, thanks so much. I was about to stop you in the interest of time. We'll continue the discussion when we open up for questions now. Thanks for the nice introduction. That's the end of the first panel. The second panelists are here as well, and I think Utpal needs to take off because he's attending another conference. So we'll quickly finish the questions for this session. And I urge I'm sure all the panelists from the first one will stay on. We can take questions. Tanvi, do you want to read out the questions?
Yeah, so we have sent out a form that participants had to fill and ask questions. So I'll just read one of them, and we can take a couple of them and then move to the next panel. The first question is, did you have a traditional academic career in mind when you started your PhD? And if yes, then at what point did the shift happen to the non-academic career? Any one of you can answer, whoever likes to answer the question.
This is
Nayal
Sudhira.
wants to, or okay.
Should I?
Sudhira and then
Yeah.
Nayal.
Yeah. So if I could confess, I think until almost till my third year of my PhD, uh, my career goal was to become a faculty at IISc because that was the world for me. In the sense, all through my initial years of my research and venture into academia, I had seen IISc and a couple of places elsewhere, including during my master's in the Netherlands and all. So I really felt IISc was the place to be as a researcher. But then I think while during my PhD, I also got exposed to a whole lot of things outside IISc, and from field biology to working with the state government and policy and many other things. And I guess gradually it seemed diminished, or the interest to become a faculty seemed diminished. But I still continue to be a part academician in the sense, once in a while, like at least once a year, I do end up publishing as a practitioner now. Not fully kept my foot out of academia, but I think still spending time in practice is what I think has drawn me to move beyond academia. I wouldn't discredit anything that is there in academia there, but I think it's just that one's interest and passion to actually discover for yourself as to what you want to do. And I really find my foot in a lot of other places than just academia. We'll stop it there.
Nayal, do you want to go?
Thanks, Sesh. So, like Sudhira, partly it was a journey, but I also have a very specific moment as well. And that very specific moment was my PhD viva, where my external examiner was grilling me about the pros and cons of the last 5 years worth of research. And during that 5 years, I'd realized that I wasn't a brilliant academic. I wasn't great at statistics. I didn't feel as though I was really going to make a big difference in that field. So I was already starting to waver anyway, just because of a lack of my own talent. But the viva was the final nail in the coffin. And what happened was that during my PhD, I had set up a community ranger program where I was financing 4 people from the local community to protect the forest from poachers and illegal deforestation, etc. And I felt this was very important, so I included it in the discussion of my PhD thesis, even though there was nothing analytical in there. There was no data. And when it came to my viva, my external examiner told me to remove that section because it wasn't analytical. There was no nothing of scientific importance. But for me, it was the only thing that mattered. The fact that I was supporting these local community members to conserve that area of forest mattered so much more than the phylogenetics of tapirs in Honduras to me. And so I felt at that point that my examiner confirmed to me that what I care about is the conservation of this species, not studying its conservation. And there are 2 slight differences there between being a conservation biologist and a conservationist. So I sat there in my viva and was told I had to spend about 6 months rewriting all of the terrible errors in my PhD. And at that moment, I decided I would do that. But as soon as I submit, that was it. I was out of academia and I was going for conservation.
Manisha has something to add. Manisha, go ahead.
Yeah, so great to hear these personal anecdotes, right? As I think so, I thought it might help if I also put down some thoughts. For me, the shift actually happened like Nail is saying during the Viva. For me, it happened while I was writing my thesis, and I realized that I enjoy the analysis part a lot. Like you give me you take some data, you analyze it to the core, you look at various ways to do it. But somehow I realized that the why question didn't excite me that much. I was more into the analysis part. I was more enamored by the techniques, statistical techniques, programming, all that. And I think that was my moment when I decided that maybe with this kind of a mindset, I don't think I'll make a good academician. I won't make a good PI, because in science, the why comes first and has to, because that's where you start out, and the possibilities are endless. Like you end up using everything. Like I ended up using Bayesian statistics in my PhD, which I was never trained for. But I realized that I enjoyed doing the Bayesian stats more than asking why I was doing it. So that was my shifting moment for me. So yeah, yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Manisha. Okay, I will move on to the next question. So there's one question from Katta Abhishek. He asked whether getting a job in academia, is it very, very tough? Utpal, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, like I said, I'm part of the control group here because I'm still trying to get a job in academia. It depends, right? Unfortunately, I'm not really familiar with the Indian scene right now, the academic scene in India, but I've heard a lot of great things about, the new the ICERs coming up, right? And I know a lot of my previous colleagues from India who've got, position as a tenure track position, right, in academia. So when you're talking about a job in academia, I'm assuming you're talking about like a tenure track profession, right? So like being a professor. At least in this part of the world, it's really hard. In the US, you can almost forget about it. I read a statistics that only about 3% of the people who get a PhD actually move on to become tenure track professors. 3%. Everyone else, for some reason or the other, ends up doing other things. Yeah, so I think the earlier, connecting this to the previous question, the earlier you realize that this is not for you, the better it is, because in many ways, academia can be like a quicksand, right? Because you're specializing as you go ahead with your degrees, and it can be hard to then you tend to over specialize, right? You don't fit a lot of jobs, and then it can be difficult. But I would say in general, yeah, academia is pretty cutthroat. There's a lot of competition, and like Bharat said, there's more people than positions, right? So the world is churning out PhDs now. The PhD is like the new masters, right? Sorry, the master's is like a new PhD. So everyone does a PhD these days almost. So it can be hard. Yeah.
Thanks, Utpal. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Tanveen, may I jump in for
Tanveen.
Yes.
I see a bunch of questions on the chat that maybe could be better answered at the end, because you're going to have a second panel that might actually cover some of this as we go. And then what doesn't get covered, we're happy to cover again, because we are at 4:30 and we've got a whole nother panel of other options to hear from now.
Yes. We were almost about to switch to the next panel. Yeah. Cool.
Thanks, Maria. My internet snapped, so I'm back online now. I was about to jump in.
Yeah.
So I agree with Dr. Maria. We'll stop the questions for now and invite the second panel to go, and then we'll ask these questions that are popping up on the chat box at the end. May I now invite?
Sheshadri, one minute. Just this is regarding the job. I just want to add that there is too much job.
I think.
No, just 1 minute. There is too much job to be done in India, but that will pay or not is a question.
We'll come back to that. That's an excellent point. I think we'll come back to that question in the end of the panel discussion. And may I now invite Anuj, Dr. Anuj, to talk about his work. Over to you, Anuj.
Sure. Thanks, Shashadri. Thanks, everyone, for staying on for the second panel. So just like many others, I think I have a fairly unusual career progression. So I kind of started off just learning, having a passion for nature as long as I can remember. But growing up, well, I was an urban kid. I grew up in cities, northern India, 3 states, largely around UP, Rajasthan, and Madhya Pradesh. And as I was growing up, my dad kind of brainwashed me to take up engineering, as he's pretty good in maths. I saw him doing it and I was like, okay, this is cool, right? But as I got into it, I realized, all right, I need to be outside, I need to be outdoors. So I was on the hunt for my dose of nature from the very next day. Yeah. So my engineering, for my engineering, I should add that I came to Singapore. This was in NTU, Nanyang Technological University, great campus, very green, and kind of helped me dabble into nature. But that curiosity kind of grew and grew. I discovered biomimicry, which some of you may know is how to look at nature's design and or nature's genius and apply it to design. That kind of blew me away because it suddenly gave me a way to connect engineering and nature. I sat with that knowledge for a number of years because there wasn't much going on in Asia. Worked in an NGO, nature conservation NGO, just out of my interest, a couple of years again, and then was hungry for more, right? Hungry to learn the techniques, hungry for a deeper dive into ecology. So I signed up for a PhD at the National University of Singapore and got one. But in hindsight, well, because Singapore is a city, I think without realizing, I got my training in urban ecology, right? And as I reflect more and more, I think it's becoming an important field in our urbanized world. So that got over in 2016, shortly after or immediately after I got a job in BirdLife International, which is a conservation NGO headquartered in Cambridge. I work for the regional office. So that's where I started, right? Looking at conservation because that's what got me interested, and I don't need to explain with engineering, biomimicry, ecology, why didn't I choose academia? Because there was no role that allowed me to fit into that multidisciplinary academic position. But equally, I had a very strong interest in conservation and advocacy. So I went on to work at an NGO. Yeah, I still work with BirdLife. It's been 5 years, but I'm now part-time. So I spend about half of my time there, but the other half is to do research. I started off, my first lab was in insects, so I still do insect ecology. And then over the years, I've developed a consultancy, which looks at ecology and biomimicry design. And I also do some teaching at the National University of Singapore, which I'll come to in a second. And now I want to pick up 2 points, which is about, I think we've heard a lot about skills, right? So those skills are universal. I learned all the analytical skills, which helped me today. But the 2 points are about urban ecology and money. Yeah. Now, both of these are related because what I've found, well, a lot of ecologists really, really like the wild nature, right? We love to go after tigers, we love to go after tapirs and the elephants and in the coolest spaces that are out there on the planet, right? And yes, there are limited ways to make money, for one, and second, we are urbanizing. I think we can't deny that. More than half of the world lives in cities, and the policymakers are here. We've heard about citizen scientists, majority of which live in cities, right? And so we also acknowledge that who's building our cities? I think that is the question we don't think about, right? It's the architects, the developers, right? And that is what got me really hooked into my line of work, which I'm in now. So I work with a lot of architects and developers, landscape architects, to actually teach ecology. So I teach at the department, well, in NUS at the Department of Architecture. And also my consultancy is revolved around that, right? So better do ecological planning, design, both at the city scale and at larger sort of rural urban scale, right? And I think that is a fascinating field which few ecologists get into, right? Because there's a lot of urban planning, you know, India is churning out smart cities like nobody's business. And, you know, you got to make, what is smart? You got to make a city smart with ecological infrastructure. And I think that is a new shining field that we can all look into. I think I'll pause there and maybe return to questions later on.
Thanks, Anuj. That's an excellent overview of what you do. May I now invite our next panelist, Arko, Dr. Arkamitra Vishnu, as Arko as we know her.
Okay. Hi, Sheshadri. Arko sounds much better than Arkamitra, probably. Okay, so I will just start my story. I spent almost 12 years in academia, and I always call myself that as I'm a very passionate fungal biologist. And I did my PhD long back. Then I spent some time abroad, did some lab rotation. Then I finally ended up in CS, very own. And yeah, even though I was trained as a fungal researcher, but I was kind of looking into a very complex system where it was a tripartite symbiotic system where I have to, characterize some fungal system which is involved with a very insect. It was a fascinating system, and I loved my time at CS. And at the end, as I was ending towards my postdoc, then I think we all this is the phase you all will probably face during your PhD also. What next? So it happened to me at the end of my PhD, and it again happened at the end of my postdoc. And it took a while for some time that what next? And I was somewhat bit sure that I don't want to do a teaching job, because I actually started my career before my PhD. I used to teach in postgraduate MSc class. Then I dropped out, then I started my PhD. So after giving it a thought, then I came to know that there was a couple of friends who were looking into venturing into a little bit unconventional way of giving back to the society of academia, that what else can you do? So I got to know that there is something called research facilitator or a research management or scientific research management that you can look into. It's a quite new field in the Indian context, yeah, but if you go into abroad, most of the labs, most of the universities have similar sort of positions. But in Indian context, it was very new. And luckily, I have came across few people who are working with, DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance, where they have this, idea of that grant management or the research management. So I got to know a bit about it. So finally, what I do currently, and I ended up at a National Center for Biological Science, where there is a program. It's a quite big program. It is funded by DBT. The program is called Chemical Ecology Program, which kind of encompass two distinct zones of Northeast region and the Bangalore cluster. And I look after total 10 institutes across India, where we have 7 institutes from Northeast and 3 from Bangalore. And what we are trying to do in this program is that there are almost 20 PIs, 15 PhD students, 10 postdocs, and lots of project assistants and technicians. It's a group of consortium, a research consortium, where we are trying to look into the completely, it's mostly unexplored biodiversity region of the Northeast. Most of the field is done here. And the student actually, after doing their field, they get back. And the Bangalore cluster, which is National Center for Biological Science, IISc, and University of Agricultural Science, essentially provide the infrastructure and the lab support and the, teaching support so that the student can complete their work. So this is a approach, and I look after the entire program as a manager. So what is my job here? So I try to look into three contexts. I look into the research context as well. In the research context, I have to monitor the progress of the students and obviously the PIs, that how much the program is going, that how much data, the publications, the writing. I have to collect all the reports. I have to monitor everything. And I need to write the grants, obviously. As we are passing towards years, we have to submit the next phase proposals or something. So I have to look that. So there are a lot of things I have to come across where I have to gather all the people and I write the grant and proposal and everything as well. Then the second phase is the capacity building. What is capacity? Capacity building is that this program is essentially look after the Northeast region students. So we are kind of providing them a scientific environment and kind of an structure where they can thrive better. And we are providing them a better research atmosphere in the Bangalore cluster so that they can do, they can learn more, they can get to experience cutting edge research technologies so that they can be better at research. So we are providing them this capacity. How do we do that? We organize lots of workshops, trainings, field trainings and workshops in tools and GCMS techniques and other molecular techniques and all. Third part is that outreach program. I also look after that because we want to talk about our program more. We want more students to join into the subject. Just like as we are talking to you today, we want more young researchers to join in our program. So for that, we organize a lot of popular talks, scientific events, awareness programs, so that in the Northeast context, we do a lot of that. So I mostly look into this three part. And so it's a lot of work actually, and a lot of people. So three parts, a lot of people, a lot of institute, and this is our side of part, like the researcher part. But here the second context is here that I look into the people who actually gave us the money. That is a Department of Biotechnology. So I have to do a lot of, liaising with them. So because they are the one who is giving us money, so I have to conduct a lot of meetings with them. I have to negotiate with them a lot that, okay, it's more of that, it's what is benefiting our program. So that, okay, so yeah, a lot of time goes into that funding agency discussion and meeting also. So basically my job, as I call that, I'm the bridge, not just me, anyone who is in this research manager or the scientific project management business, they are essentially built a bridge who have to handle a lot of people in this context. They need to know the subject a lot. They need to know how to deal with the funding agencies in the government of India context. And I think sooner or later, all of you will know, which is not a very easy job. And of course, you have to look after the most important part is you people, which is a student, that it's your PhD at stake, it's your research at stake, and it is your necessity that what you need. If you are most of the students in my program are from the Northeast, many of the time they're stuck at field. They need something and they can't reach to their PI. So I have to look at what is the specific requirement, how can I help them? And obviously the PI have a very different set of requirements. Maybe they need some fund, which is not coming. They need some data, they need something. So each and every set of people have a very different set of requirements. And being into this research management position, my job is to look into that it goes perfectly. And of course, the administrator, and being into NCBS or if anywhere, any institute, you have to have a very good relationship with the administrators also, or else your work will never be done. So that's how my job was. And so there was a question, as Tanveen and Shishadri said, that what are the skill sets that how can you end up in? So I think most of the skill set you learn in your PhD. So the most important is the time management. Without time management, you cannot sustain in this business for a single day. So that everything comes into your deadline, like a proposal submission deadline maybe into 10 days, you have to do it. There might be a report and the funding agency might call you just 2 days before that, submit your report or something. You have to do that. And this thing you need to learn once you entering into this job. Analytical skills, obviously, every single thing, analysis is the part, and this will take you a long go. A multitasking that you are doing, obviously you have to do. I'm just doing it into a broader scale, that's all. And communication. I think if you don't love talking, then probably it's not your job. And you need to talk to a lot of people. You need to convince people, you need to get your job done. And so this also requires into this thing. These are, I think, the most specific skills, basic skills, obviously, and subject matters. Obviously, if you are looking after, like I'm looking into the chemical ecology program, in ISC, I was in one of the the chemical ecology lab itself. I was at the R&B lab. So I got to, even though I never really had the exposure before with the chemical ecology, I got that experience here. But other than that, similarly, I have a colleague who looks into the stem cell research program, who has the background in that similar subject. So some of the subjects experience do matter here, because you have to look into the research component as well. Other than that, I think there was one question which says that what is the recommendation to pursue in this? As I said, that if you don't really seeking a job which is exactly into academia, like teaching or being an faculty or the research, then this is an option which you can definitely look for. This is still being into science, but it's not exactly doing the exact, the classroom teaching or something else, but you are still helping people. So if you feel like that, I want to help, like I always enjoyed working with the students. Like I still remember CES have a molecular ecology lab, and most of the time, me and one of my friend who is also right now with the India Welcome Trust, most of the people who used to come there for the use of the PCR or something, I ended up helping them, and I kind of enjoyed that okay, this is my protocol, how to do that, how to do this. So I used to sit them, or we used to help them, and it kind of, but I never really enjoyed the sitting in the classroom or going through the same syllabus or teaching the same thing. That I never really enjoyed. So this is something where you feel like helping someone, but in a bit different way. This is something probably you can do. And yeah, I think that's how it is. And academia, as the question was also coming, that is it very tough? Yeah, academic job is something, it takes a bit time. Sometimes people can use it as a stopgap also. Maybe you need to figure it out what you are doing. So yeah, I think that's for now. I hope it's okay, Shishaji, or do I need to talk some more?
No, this is excellent, Arpo. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I think we'll get back to some of the answers, and maybe even some of the questions. We'll touch upon them subsequently.
Sure.
May I now invite Dr. Madhura, my former labmate, to talk about her work.
Thanks, Sheshadri.
Hey, Madhura, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today, and thank you everyone for staying on for the second panel. Just to give everyone a brief background, I did my PhD from the Center for Ecological Sciences with Dr. Manisha Bhattacharya. For my PhD, I studied animal behavior. I studied the very fascinating color-changing behavior displayed by males of an Indian agamid lizard. This is the Indian rock agama, and I used a bunch of lab-based experiments, lab-based assays, and field-based experiments to answer different questions about what the costs and benefits of displaying this behavior are for these particular animals. Towards the later end of my PhD, I realized that I probably do not want to go down the conventional path of postdoc and then an academic job. And that's when I started looking for alternative career options. I realized I liked scientific writing. I had picked up some scientific communication skills during my PhD. and scientific publishing seemed like an exciting career option. So I started looking for jobs in that domain. So right now I work with Wiley, which is a multinational publishing company. Among other things, it produces a lot of academic journals which publish scientific papers. So as you may be aware that whenever researchers submit their manuscripts to any journal, this manuscript undergoes a peer review process where your peers who are researchers or experts in their field, they review your manuscript for its scientific merit. So within Wiley, I work in their research division in a team that manages this peer review process. So this process starts when any paper is submitted to a journal for consideration and ends when the paper receives its final decision, which could be an acceptance or rejection or anything in between. So as part of my day-to-day work, I have two primary roles. One is, like I said, I manage specific tasks associated with this peer review process. This could be at any stage of the process, like I said, starting from when a paper is submitted to when a paper receives its final decision. This involves communicating with authors, reviewers, editors, the journal's editorial staff to ensure that the manuscript is moving as efficiently as possible through the peer review system. Sometimes this also involves a lot of tracking and creating reports to monitor whether a journal is doing well or not. So we also monitor the journal's performance. The second role that I have is that I am involved in rolling out special projects and services that this company offers to our authors and reviewers. So again, these are services which assist our authors and reviewers in carrying out efficient peer review. So for example, one such project that I'm involved with is an image screening project where we check images that are submitted by authors for possible fraud or manipulation. So when I'm setting up these projects, my role is to liaise with editors, authors, reviewers to get their feedback on what sort of services would they find most useful for peer review. I would then implement these services on a few journals. Again, get the feedback from all of these different stakeholders as to how it's going on, and continuously improve these processes based on the feedback that I'm getting, and continuously improving these services and implementing them as much as possible. So that's basically my role as a senior associate in this company. I think as part of my job, I use the skills that I learned during my PhD on an everyday basis. I think we don't always realize that there are a lot of transferable skills that we pick up during our PhD, which are applicable to a wide variety of roles and in industries. So like I said, I'm involved in setting up new projects. So this is very similar to what we do when we are carrying out research experiments. We are designing experiments, we are trying to interpret the data, we are analyzing this data, and this is exactly what I do here. I set up projects, I examine how it's going. As part of the projects, there is data being generated. I examine this data to see what needs to be improved upon, what is it that needs to stop and needs to be altered, and so on. I also published 2 papers during my PhD, so I had some experience with the peer review process. I had the experience of being an author. So now that I'm on this side of things, I can use that experience to ensure that when authors are publishing with us, they get a good experience, and I understand the pain point of authors. So that's a useful skill. During your PhD, you do a lot of presentations, you create a lot of reports, you give a lot of talks. So communication is a big part of my day-to-day job. I am constantly talking to editors, to authors, to reviewers, because I'm trying to understand their requirements. I'm trying to convince them of my ideas. So having good communication skills is really important. Quantitative skills that I picked up during my PhD are important because, again, we have all these papers coming in. We are monitoring their numbers. This data is being constantly analyzed. So that's where quant skills come in handy. And I think just to wrap this up, scientific publishing is a great career option after finishing a PhD in science. The role that I described, the role that I have, is just one of several possible roles in this industry. If you have good subject matter expertise, if you have good communication skills, and if you have a research and analytical mindset, which you develop during the course of your PhD, I think you have an edge over others because not everyone has this analytical mindset, and this is a competitive industry. So this kind of skill set allows you to constantly take on challenges and tackle them. And these are some of the skills that after having a after doing a PhD, you can always use to transition into most of these careers outside of academia. So I think that's all I had to say, and I'll be happy for any questions later on. Thank you.
Thanks, Madhura. Thanks for that really brief bio. We are now over to our last but not the least speaker, panelist, Dr. Nitin. May I invite Dr. Nitin to take over, please?
Hi. Yeah, thanks. So I actually put together a few slides. I hope it's okay if I share those. Can you enable that?
Yeah. Hang on,
Awesome.
Let me do that. Are you able to see something now? Be able to share?
Yep, it's working.
Yep.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay. So hello everyone. Thank you for your time, and I'll try to be relatively brief since I'm the last one. So basically, I serve as the coordinator for WWF's National Elephant Conservation Program. So first, let me give a little bit of background about my PhD work. So I'm actually, U.S. born and bred, and so I was based at a U.S. university for my PhD, but I was a visiting student at CES and IASC. And so they helped me get started with my field work in India. And so I did a couple of projects in India. One is I studied the role of elephants in seed dispersal in Buxar Tiger Reserve. So my main question was, if elephants were to go missing, if they were to go extinct or be extirpated, how would that actually change a key ecological function in the forest? And I looked at seed dispersal. I just want to note, because of all the discussion about skills, that I didn't actually get any generalizable analytical skills during that process. I did a second project about whether the relocations of Adivasi communities from Melghat Tiger Reserve in Maharashtra, whether those relocations were truly voluntary, as the government claimed, and whether those relocations led to favorable socioeconomic results. Again, the government claimed that when these communities are moved out of the forest, they end up with better lives, better opportunities, better facilities. And for that, I did dabble in some pretty generalizable methods, which are qualitative interview skills, right? And I had to learn some more Hindi to do that. And I also did some side projects on the ivory trade in Africa, especially ecotourism in Tanzania, and zoonotic diseases. And the basic theme here is that I wasn't exactly sure what it is I wanted to do. I was clearly interested in the interface of humans, human communities, and wildlife and ecosystems, but that's pretty much what I knew. And I explored all these things during my PhD. Anyway, so what do I do now? So as the coordinator for WWF India's Elephant Conservation Program, I helped kind of define a big strategy for what's our vision for elephants in India. And so, in the big picture, every day I'm trying to find strategic ways to make it possible for India, despite having 1.3+ billion people, large, humanely managed populations of wild elephants that have adequate resources, food, water, space across their range, and that are actually living alongside human communities that are happy to have them, right? So, basically minimal human-elephant conflict, making sure that both elephants and people's interests are met. And so that's a big picture. And we have, I think I'm probably working on somewhere between, a dozen and 20 projects at any given time. And, some examples, we're trying to understand the cultural, economic, and ecological drivers of human-elephant conflict. So that's clearly research. We're also trying to do an experiment in the Western Ghats to see whether we can replace lantana with native vegetation using interventions actually recommended to us by the Soluga tribals, Adivasis. I worked with an NCBS student on his master's project to try and understand why in Assam, when we given many communities the same help to build non-lethal electric fences, why some communities maintained those fences and they were functional, they protected their crops from elephants and prevented human-elephant conflict, while other communities didn't maintain those fences. What was causing those differences? And I also worked to help try and shape policies on how captive elephants are treated across the country. So, if you're anything like me, these projects are all really, really exciting, especially as far as the questions underlying them and the methods that you have to think about. But the fact is, the reason I can work on so many such diverse projects is because other people are doing a lot of the real fun field work, right? So my day-to-day is to kind of do a lot of what Arko was talking about, like prioritizing, trying to figure out how to manage my time, figure out what's the most important thing, get the funds so that all these other people can do really cool work, try to find talent, people like you, to hire and bring into WWF India, and then because I have some research training, I do help with reading, research, framing, designing questions, writing, and that kind of thing. So what did a PhD in ecology help me do, or how did it help me get to where I want, or where I am? So first, I think that the fact is that a lot of the problems in conservation, including human-elephant conflict, are just huge. And you're never going to have all the information you need to truly fully answer the question, to come up with like a completely fail-safe policy. And so, one thing I learned from my PhD was how to piece together different types of evidence to get the best possible answer, about a complex ecosystem, a complex system with limited time, limited funds, limited opportunities, resources. Another thing is that, especially because I grew up in the US, in the suburbs, like I didn't really know what it's like to experience human-elephant conflict. And obviously, I don't really know what it's like to be poor and experience it even now, but living in a community where elephants came in and knocked down people's kitchens and took their crops, it kind of really helped me understand just how severe the problem is, what it means for people, and that this isn't just an ecological problem. It's actually a political problem, it's an economics problem, it's a sociological problem. And ecology can help measure the outcomes, but the actual interventions, the solutions are going to be multidimensional, right? And finally, it made me a much more independent person, because I just by good luck or bad luck, I didn't have a lot of support as far as like day-to-day mentorship. I had wonderful support as far as logistics and helped me get started. But then I had to learn how to take these big problems and break them down into smaller solvable problems. And that's just it's really helpful when you're trying to kind of build something new. So recommendations. So I have, I guess, two big kind of categories here. So the first is, think in terms of the problem you want to solve and not necessarily the discipline or the field. And I think some of what Anuj was saying about urban ecology and architecture really kind of hits on this, right? So, if you want to conserve an animal species, a lot of us are taught, okay, if you love animals, you go into ecology, you get a degree in this field that has to do with animals, and then you can help them. But the fact is that, many interventions we need to help, whether it's animals, plants, any funguses, any sort of ecological entity, often those interventions aren't taught very, particularly in the field of ecology. So if you are, for instance, trying to, solve a habitat problem, help protect habitat, the primary problem could be land use, like the building of infrastructure and highways, or unplanned townships, people just kind of spreading their houses into habitat. And so maybe what you need there is some skills in urban planning or land regulation or sociology to understand what's motivating people, and not necessarily just ecology. Ecology is a wonderful systems framework, but think about the problem and what you need to solve the problem. Don't be limited by your being an ecologist. And one thing I want to say along those lines is, this is where the passion comes in, right? You figure what problem you're passionate about, but also don't wait for the perfect problem, right? Like, because, there may not be any one problem that's going to completely grab and, dominate your interests. Almost passion is good enough. Something that you're really interested in, that you care about, because once you drill down, you're going to get skills that are going to allow you to, one day when you figure out what you're really even more passionate about, you can continue to work on that. But if you spend too much time flitting, then there's a trade-off there. You're not getting deep, which is really, especially whether it's a master's or PhD, any sort of extended study, the big advantage is that you have a chance to go deep, which is much harder to find later in life when, whatever, you have other priorities. So once you figure out the problem, think about your skills. And this is where the really practical thing comes in. And so folks have talked about communication, like writing, people have talked about statistics a lot. Those are awesome. But there's a lot more skills. I think some other things mentioned, time management, communications, all of these are relevant. And think broadly, widely about what skills are really important for the problem you want to solve. So I had GS down there, qualitative research. I was surprised. I'm not like I was a science guy. I love math, but it turned out that I got much better information talking to people in, say, male-got tigers or about their life experiences and learning how to do qualitative research than I I got from the insights that came from statistics in my research. So you think broadly about it, and make sure that there's a good match between your passion or your almost passion, the problem you want to solve, and the skills you want to gain. And that'll set you up, even if you want to move somewhere else in the future, you'll be set up well. But that's what I have. I hope I didn't go too far over on time.
Awesome. Thanks, Nitin. Thanks so much for that nice presentation and overview. We have come to the end of the second introduction of the second panelist. Do we have any questions for the second panel? We'll just take questions now. And then a couple of announcements that I want to make is that we have decided to extend the question and answer session for about 15 minutes. So we'll go on until 5:15 and discuss a few of the questions that obviously need a longer answer. And I request the panelists, if you don't have a pressing need to be elsewhere, then please stay on. If you really need to leave, then please feel free. And we really thank you for your time. And we really, really appreciate that you could make it here today, despite all the different time zones and everything. With that, I'll open up for questions. I don't see anything in the chat box that is addressed to the second panel. If there are no questions specific to the second panel, oh, there's one. Hey. Kajal asks, how often do your coworkers in your respective non-academic careers have a PhD? And again, I think this is people from both the panels can answer this, but do any of you want to do this? Manisha, please do.
My manager is a PhD, coincidentally from the computer science and automation department in ISC. So yeah, I do get a lot of co-workers who are PhDs, so especially in data science and artificial intelligence. Yeah, I just want to make a small point because in data science and in AI, you would see a lot of people from computer science or engineering doing a PhD and coming into it, or after their masters. But I think the training we receive in ecology, especially statistics, data, and all that all the panelists have been talking about, essentially logical thinking, building up the project, everything, that can really help us crack it into the corporate world if people are interested. That's it.
Orko, you wanted to say something? Please do. Hey,
you're
Orko,
on mute.
you're muted.
Orko, you're mute.
Yes, I can come in next.
So
Okay, Sudhira next.
In my field, most of the people I come across, they have a PhD and additionally 2 to 5 years of postdoctoral experience mostly. Some of them have additional management degree as well, but without that, but some of them without PhDs are also there, but that is a bit less in number.
Yeah, so part of our science communication team, we have a couple of them who are PhDs. Although they're into full-time into writing and communicating science. So you do have PhDs around.
Could I just for contrast, if I could jump in. At WF India, we have a lot of people, especially people who are in the science kind of coordinator roles like myself. Almost all of us have PhDs, but there's a lot of folks who don't have PhDs, right? So if you're like folks who are doing communications work, folks who are doing community-based conservation work, people who are in management, my kind of boss, so to speak, he's an IAM grad, but he like reads science all the time, he understands all this stuff. Like, I mean, it's, you gotta be, I think it's good to think about whether this credential is gonna help you or not. but I'm this is a little bit naive and idealistic, I think, but if you can focus on things that you're passionate at and good at and to demonstrate a track record of productivity, I think you can often do pretty well. And a PhD is just one example of that in our field.
Bharat, before I come back to you, there's a question addressed to Nitin, who was in the second panel. Nitin, Udita is asking, you suggested getting skills outside of ecology, but once we are in academia, how can we go about gathering these other skills? Do you have a quick answer for this?
Sure. No, well, so I mean, one of the cool things is that in many PhD programs, you still do have scope to kind of pick your own classes even outside of, outside of your discipline, right? And so that's don't be shy about that. So I took policy classes, I took econometrics classes, and even though I didn't take a class in qualitative interviews, I worked with experts in that field. And so, if you go and ask, people will often help you kind of diversify your skill set. But once you start your career, you can learn things on the fly too. It's just a little bit hard.
Yeah. And I think one other thing that I can add to that question is that you can learn a lot about, you can get a lot of these other skills by doing things like volunteering. It helps you learn things about organizing, having a plan, checking all the boxes and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, and what Neil was talking about, he did a whole other side project, right, where he learned how to get people to do tech. So I mean, so you can, there's also projects that you can do on the side while you're out doing your PhD that will, you're gaining skills. If you're doing what you're passionate about, you're learning skills related to that.
Yeah. Monisha, Varad and then Monisha. Varad had something quick to add.
So whenever we talk about careers in ecology, we are just thinking about academics, joining academics institutes only. No, ecology means everything. There is education involved, there is awareness involved, there is advocacy involved, there is many things which are there. And there, we don't need any degree, we need passion and we need the hard work, dedication, time management, all the points which are mentioned here, they all needed that. The degree is needed when you want to join as a professor in some college, some institute, somewhere. Okay. But if you want to look at the options available in India, there are tremendous options which nobody is willing to tap. That is what is the problem. I think how many people are dedicatedly into awareness? No? See, it is not less than 11,000 crore business, tiger tourism. Don't you feel that there is awareness needed? If tourism can face this much amount of money, imagine how much job opportunity is there. But who is tapping on that? So that is what is the problem. So every person, whoever wants to join ecology, they want to join some institute and do some research. But at the end of the day, advocacy is important, awareness is important, and there we need dedicated people. That's what I wanted to add.
No. Thanks, Varad. I think you did my job. I was going to summarize this. The discussion at the end saying academia is not the only option and there are these other various ways one can choose, and that's what we have learned from all the panelists who have spoken today. Before we come back, I have a question on the finances and the money part. Before we get to that, Manisha had something to add about the
just a footnote to what Nitin and Varad have already added. I just wanted to point out, first of all, that Sudhira already mentioned that doing your PhD from a place like ISC, there are n number of courses you can choose from, which may not be related to your PhD, but just you're passionate about or you want to learn about, right? That's one thing. And secondly, I want to point out, especially something that helped me a lot, is that when I was doing my PhD in CES, I had a tremendous opportunity to explore things that I had never heard about, because I had to crack my problem. And I saw the same thing with my colleagues, my batchmates in CES, right? So they would go about doing like for me, the thing was more about like statistics, figuring out different statistics ways. But my colleagues went out into the field, they established their own field station, they had to deal with local village boys, explain to them why conserving, why they are studying behavior of crickets, get them interested. So manage a whole team, you know. And I think during your PhD, PhD is a way of life. It doesn't just teach you academics, it teaches you how to live. So you pick up a lot of things while doing a PhD. So it's yeah, that's it. I won't stretch it further.
Just one sentence to that. There's another way of doing it is collaboration, right? You can learn a lot through collaboration too. So you know, you don't have to. I mean, if you don't have the option of taking classes, collaborate. And you know, science is getting more and more integrative these days, so you should be able to pick up a lot of skills.
Orko, you have something to add?
Seshadri, there is one interesting question, and that talks about is there any job security after PhD?
Yeah,
that is a
we'll come back to this.
Question, yeah.
We'll that's the reason why we extended, because that's going to be a discussion. After Orko, we'll take up that question.
I just want to add after Manisha and Utpal that yeah, I mean what I also got that collaboration and communicating. I mean, even more than degree, what helped probably is talking. Like, I mean, if you talk to, you get to know a lot of things. If you talk to people from different groups, different working, and it always doesn't really matter that you have to really stick to your subject groups or something, which really I see helped me in that way. Like talking, like initially when I started, like field is one aspect, then I started doing NGS, then sequencing trouble started, then I started talking here and there. How this idea came, you never know from where help comes, and it never really hurt to ask for that. Hey, I need something, do you have this? It never hurts. And so even if you don't have a degree, that as well as a volunteering or something, just walk into somebody's office or something, that I am interested in, do you have something for me? It sometimes helps. How bad it is, like you can go to a communication office or somewhere, science communication, many times people end up doing volunteering or something, or some workshop, some internship. It really helps, even though if you don't have enough experience or something. So talking and building a communication, I think this too matters more than probably your degree, if you have to be into any other career or something. This is what I just want to add.
Yep. That's really the point. We'll move on to the next question, which there are two questions about. One asks a direct, what's your pay scale kind of thing. I'm sure all of us don't want to reveal our pay scales out here, but I think we can answer part of that question in the second question, where Abhinav asks about financial security, and I'm sure as a up-and-coming student in India, that's something that I was worried about back when I was an undergrad or a master's. Would I have enough finances in a career in ecology or in allied fields? Would any of you want to answer this question? Hey, Manisha.
Very quick answer. If you get into a corporate job, yes, you would have security.
Varad.
See, if you want to think of bread and butter in the ecology section, either you get bread or you get butter. No, you don't get both. And if you want to know, like what I mean to say here is, if you have a proper strategy, like my entire living is on whatever I do. I don't have any other job. So I started as a taxonomist. I got the job. I did something. Then I did something. And then today I am an education person trying to educate people. So I feel that there is tremendous opportunity. We just need to explore ourselves. We need to break that barrier. We need to break that border which we have. Many times people feel that I'm a taxonomist. I can't do anything else. That is not the case. You can do wonderful things. If you want to do science, there is opportunity. If you want to do education, there is opportunity. I think we have to have a strong planning. I think there is no dearth, but the only problem is the people with PhD will never go and talk to the school kids. They feel that this is below my dignity.
Well, I don't think that's entirely true. Well, I mean, look, like I think you're right that PhDs are sort of overhyped and sort of blown up as this great thing. But I mean, I think like the point is people can use a PhD to find their own way. But what I do agree with you, Bhattacharya, is that like, you know, what people consider to be secure or stable or sufficient resources, you know, like there's a big range of what people consider to be sufficient. And so, you know, one part is being honest with yourself about how much insecurity or how much minimalism you're comfortable with, and you know how flexible you want to be, whether the joys of pursuing your passion, teaching school kids in some village, will offset the insecurity for you or not. Like that's something that people have to figure out, but that a lot of these sort of definitions of success are semi-artificial. But I do think that, you know, one thing I said in my last slide is, like I said here, that when you talk about skills, think practical, right? And I think it is good to have a plan B, right? Because even if you're really comfortable going out there and teaching school kids somewhere, if someone you love in your family gets hit by a truck and you need to pay for their thing and your health insurance, like there's no shortcut. No matter how much you love teaching kids, it's not always going to help you, right? So it's good to, like, when you're figuring out which skills you have, think about what other roads that can take you down, right? So if you get really good at statistics, you don't have to go and work for a multinational company, but you can have that as a backup, right? If you get really good at qualitative research, you know, the UN Development Program might hire you to go and talk to people who are about to get, you know, like flooded by a dam that they're well, not dams are out now, but, you know, other big like development projects, right? So like it's just really, apparently Maria, I may have traumatized people with my example, Maria has told me, but like, just, you know, do think about, like, your skills can help bridge you between your passions and some of the practical, unfortunate realities of resource limitation. Sorry.
Niall, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you. Nitin and Vera making very interesting points. And Nitin, I think what you've touched on there was really vital as well. Is you guys, you are graduates. That makes you very, very employable. You have power in your labor. And it's difficult sometimes when you're going into the labor market to understand that power dynamic, because we always feel that you are trying to appeal to an employer to hire you. Whereas really, an employer should be appealing to you, for you as the talented graduate, that me as an employer, I want you to come and work for me. And if you understand that power dynamic and you appreciate that power dynamic, it changes the mentality. I've been thinking about this in terms recently. Big oil companies are now struggling to recruit because young, talented people that they need will not work for them unless they're talking about going carbon neutral by 2050. So the CEO of Shell, one of the biggest oil companies in the world, can no longer find enough people to work for his company because you, talented graduates, won't work for him unless he says we're going climate neutral. So use your labor as a weapon. You are among the most talented people in the world. And if you are willing to go and work for Shell and not drive change, then I think you're misapplying your labor. Go and work for a multinational, that's by all means, but do that with caveats and make sure that you create change from within. And that comes from confidence in yourself. Another problem with really talented people is you tend to be underconfident. We tend to underappreciate how valuable our skills are. It's that imposter syndrome. I did a TV program with David Attenborough recently. How the hell did they get me on to do that? Like, I'm still like, why am I here? Why have they got me? All the way through our careers, we will feel that imposter syndrome, but try and get beyond that and use the power of your labor. It's a really powerful thing.
Utpal, you have something to add. Thanks, Neil. And Nitin and Varad.
Yeah, I think some of the blame for this should also go to just how academia is set up, right? So whenever there are courses like professional development, right, they always kind of assume that, you know, after a PhD, what you're going to do is you become a professor, right? They don't really, you know, there should be more, I think, input from the academic structure itself, as you know, what are the other options, non-academic options that you can do with your PhD, because like Niall said, there's a lot more that you can do, but we're just never taught to think that way, right? It's just become like a habit to, one single track. So I think a part of the blame is also with how the academic institution is set up.
Thanks, Utpal. I think that's an excellent point, and that's something that some of the organizers were thinking about to bring into focus in the next time when we do this kind of a meeting, is have the academic structure out there and include all these other options, what are called other options, as the mainstream options out there. Anuj, I think you wanted to say something.
Well, just a very quick intervention. Just a very quick intervention. If you listen to somebody who's a professor, you're going to try to become a professor, right? It's straightforward. So when I was in my PhD, my supervisor always was unhappy when I was doing side projects, and it turned out my side projects became my most important papers. So I didn't listen to him. When I went and taught students, when I volunteered, he was like, "You're wasting your time. Why the hell are you here?" And well, that is what I do now. So neither was my supervisor wrong, neither was I wrong. It's just different career progressions, right? So yeah, I would say, I would echo what Nitin and everybody else is saying: passion or almost passion. Once you've discovered that, I think we are the fathers of our journey.
Cool, thank you. We have one question from the YouTube channel that's going on. I'll read the question out. It's a slightly long one. It's by Rutvik. In a world full of specialists, how did you approach accessing your varied interests during early stages of your career before landing up in ecology? And there's a follow-up. It's not me figuring out what I like, but the things I like. In a world full of specialists.
I'm not able to hear Sheshadri. Is it the problem with me or everybody's facing that?
Everyone, I'm facing it too.
Sorry, everyone.
Yeah,
same.
Does someone I think I got the general gist of the question. Does someone I can take a stab at it, or someone else can.
Go for it, Nitin.
All right. Okay. So I think my philosophy is that there are basically three different types of activities you do in a job, right? So one is innovation, like you're doing research, you're doing something that maybe no one's ever done before. Another is routine, right? So you get really good at something. Maybe you're like you're a surgeon, and every person comes, you fix their knee. There's maybe slight variations, but you're getting really good at something that you do every day. And the third is coordination, which a lot of people have talked about, right? Talking to people, trying to get them on the same page, emails, discussions, coaxing, manipulation, whatever. Like really trying to get people together. And so folks who are really specialized, and especially they're specialized in something that's in demand, they can really fit into that routine thing really well. But folks who are more generally oriented, like myself, we can still have a role in innovation, and we can still have a big role in coordination, and kind of seeing the big picture and pulling a bunch of specialists together towards a common goal. So that's one question I think people need to ask themselves about their career. Do they want, along with security, do they want something that they can be really good at and they do every day, they feel great about themselves because they know they're good at it? Are they okay with doing something really novel every day, but not knowing whether it's going anywhere, or whether you're good at it, or whether you're really bad at it, but having the excitement of innovation? Or do you want the scale of impact that comes with coordination, right? Which involves getting, I'm working on elephant conservation across the whole country of India, right? But the reality of that, the trade-off for the scale, is that I write a lot of emails and I spend a lot of time talking to people and arguing with people, which isn't always as fun as being out there with elephants. And so I think if you're a generalist, you still have space in the coordination and innovation roles, even if it's harder in the routine.
So I think I agree with you, Nitin, because I was a taxonomist for more than 15 years. And then I used to publish papers. I described quite a lot of new species. But in the last 5 to 6 years, I started interacting with the government. I started interacting with local communities. I started interacting with citizen scientists basically. And in totality, the result is quite phenomenal. My 15 years of academic taxonomic research was only species came out, but in the last 5 years of interaction, we managed to convince Maharashtra government to declare around 10 different conservation reserves, which connects the entire Western Ghats today. We are heading ahead and trying to work there, and give more conservation value to all these forest patches. I feel that as a taxonomist, I published quite a lot of papers that gave me the publicity. Today, I'm not doing active research, but conservation is happening. So I think both the things have pros and cons.
I'll pick up that question as well. The person who asked the question is saying that they like so many things. So how do you choose how to focus? Well, I didn't focus. I took a scattergun approach to everything, just said yes to everything. I volunteered here, I did a job there. I tried as many things as I possibly could. And some of them naturally peter out. Some of them you find you're more passionate about, some of them you find you're less passionate about. But I think being open to as many things as possible is really important. And you'll discover what you're good at and what you're passionate about. And then the next question down is talking a bit more about job security again. And I'd like to go back to what Nitin said about definitions of success. If we define success as simply if you're earning a huge amount of money, that's a really narrow scope of success. And I think that needs to be removed from people's metrics that they're using here, because if you've got a huge amount of money, you've probably done that by being terrible to people on the whole. Success should be defined by the positive legacy you leave in the world. And by going into the ecological sciences and the enormous breadth that covers, because it covers everything, you are making the world a better place. So I think defining success by that positive impact is so much more important by how much you earn. And of course, you need to earn enough to live. But green growth is by far and away the biggest growth sector. We are going to see environmental jobs burgeoning. There will be more and more of these available for you. Use your labor as a weapon, as I said, and hold people to the standards that you hold yourself in terms of that positive impact you're having on the world around you.
Manisha, please go ahead.
Yeah, something a little unrelated to what has been discussed. I think I did not do justice when I explained what I do at Accenture. I want to explain that a little more in detail, just to make sure that people understand that research is not just in academia. It is not just restricted to academic positions. As you've already heard, Sudhira is into publishing papers. He's doing research. Nitin, Bharat, everyone, right? And also in the industry or in the corporate world, there are a lot of companies. Actually, most companies now have a research wing, okay? And there is and they're looking out for diverse talent. They want to build. There is, at least in Accenture, for example, there's a huge push towards inclusion and diversity. So they want people from varied backgrounds, because companies are realizing now that the more diverse people you have, you get better results. So what I just want to say is that, even if you want to pursue research, and as we have figured out that academics is cutthroat, go in for the industry, you will get research positions there also. And because you have a PhD, people would be willing to take you. So don't stop at it. That's it. Yeah. Thank you.
Utpal, you're muted.
Sheshadri, you're on mute.
Utpal said something and he was on mute and I was on mute.
So Kavita Ishwaran has a very interesting question. No, it's like in the world of full specialists. How do you approach accessing? So a person who never knew what herpetology is. I started looking at every aspect of herpetology, and today I realized that herpetology I can't study separately. I have to look at biodiversity per se. So I feel that if you have varied interest, I think that takes you to your goal. And if you are very specialized from the beginning, I think I've seen people getting frustrated after a point of time. Like if they know that I am going to do this, And if they don't do it, they get frustrated. But if I have a generalist interest, I can do, like if I don't get birds, I feel happy by looking at insects. If I don't get insects, I feel happy looking at plants. So there are too many things. No, biodiversity has too much to offer. And we shouldn't be specialists in the beginning. We should be generalists. Try to understand biodiversity in totality and then focus on your goals. That's what I used to have.
Sheshadri, just one more bit, if I may come in.
Okay. And then Utpal will repeat what he said.
Yeah, to echo what I just said, right? I often quote myself, claim myself as a general ecologist, because I am all over the place in some sense or many senses, from frogs to birds and landscape ecology or biogeography and stuff like that. And I think the point really now is, while you have specialists, I think the generalist is the new specialist. Even speaking from an urban ecology perspective, right? So you have more commoners who are also around, like look at the birds. So the generalist species are the ones who are more sort of able to accommodate or sort of survive. So in the sense, they seem to be generalists, but the generalist is also a specialist in that sense. So I guess that's the take home I have, I guess. Thank you.
Thanks, Sudhira. Utpal.
Yeah, so what I was saying while I was muted, I was just trying to corroborate what Manisha said is, for example, Einstein, right, and Darwin, they were not in academia. They were scholars, but they're not academics. So it's always possible if you're passionate enough to be able to continue doing research outside of academia.
Thank you. And I think we'll stop the discussion here. Unfortunately, we have to. And for me, I think putting this panel together, Tanveen had to lead. So on her behalf, I think we all learned a lot in hearing about the way you've come about making a difference in whichever aspect you've chosen with a PhD in ecology. And I think it's amazing and inspiring. And hopefully, most of the participants who listen to you will find something to take home from this discussion. And we want to thank you, Tanveen, Professor Kavita, and I organized this panel, and we want to thank you profusely for all the panelists for making time. I think this is a really important aspect of ecology that you've introduced our participants. And with that, thank you so much for making time. If the participants have any questions that come to us, which they need answered by you, we'll contact you again. If not, the participants have your bio and they can find you online. They will write to you. Please do spare some time of yours to answer their questions. With that, I also want to thank all the participants for sending across the questions and interacting with us on both the Zoom platform and in YouTube. Thank you so much. Have a good day or night, depending on where you are. And let's hope that a lot of good has come out of this meeting. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for organizing this.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you.
you, everyone. Yeah, bye-bye. Good to see a lot of you, a lot of familiar faces.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
See ya, bye-bye, bye-bye.
Bye.
See ya.